problem as part of the solution.
So, is fake alcohol a global threat? Just like regular alcohol, drinking illicit booze is not risk-free. The dangers attached to producing small or large amounts of unregulated wines and spirits are numerous. They include public health risks from contaminated alcohol that's impossible for drinkers to detect. The money criminals make from it bankrolls illegal activities. Illicit drinks made in one country can be smuggled to others. It's a global problem, and the true size of the threat is unknown. So an agile and coordinated international response is needed to prevent cheap, unregulated booze costing lives. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Vicky Carter, researcher Katie Morgan, editor Tara McDermott, and technical producer Toby James.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and on YouTube, where I am looking very cool this morning with some kind of an effect that's got like 12 of me behind. Woo! Oh, okay, I'll stop playing with my image. It's nicer this morning than it has been the last couple of mornings. Now, I know that's not very difficult, but still cold in Winnipeg. However, we have a high today, temperature actually going to fall to minus 21, which talks about how nice it is right now, because I think we're maybe right around minus 13, but I'll update that in a moment. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk is here. He's directing the show, and we'll be covering the commute. Hello, Corey. Kevin Ipatabo's back, our YouTube producer. Good morning, Kevin. And Abby Adiyemi is also here. Hi, Abby. Abby is our technical producer, and we'll be on the air covering weather. Abby's just confirmed that we are at minus 15 right now. So, yeah, a lot nicer than it has been, but our temperature's going to fall. Not as far as yesterday. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells. She's here with our headlines this morning on Information Radio on CBC at 2 minutes to 6 a.m. Good morning.
Good morning. A Rivers family is hoping for quick action after meeting with Manitoba's health minister yesterday, urging them to cover a life-saving treatment. 29-year-old Jeremy Bray has spinal muscular atrophy. It's a rare degenerative disease that has robbed him of the ability to control his body, and the drug that can stop its progression costs as much as $300,000 in the first year. We'll hear how that meeting went coming up. And Brandon police are hailing a new anti-theft initiative as a success. The provincially funded crackdown has resulted in 70 arrests in its first few months in Brandon. More on that as well coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
So I mentioned Winnipeg minus 21, going to feel like minus 29. Brandon, periods of snow and local blowing snow, about 2 centimeters. Your temperature will fall to minus 18 this afternoon, and lots of sunshine up in Thompson and a high of minus 21. We are going to talk right out the gate after World Report about the Exchange District in Winnipeg about to be illuminated. With an array of light-based art installations, we're going to get a preview of this year's Lights on the Exchange event that's coming up. In addition, we will have a conversation about efforts to get much-needed supplies to the people of Gaza now that the ceasefire has taken hold. So stay tuned. That's all still ahead on the show.
Today on Q.
I'm Saroja Coelho in for Tom Power. When Steven Soderbergh asked Lucy Liu to star in his film Presence, saying yes was a no-brainer. She talks to Tom Power about how the experience on their new film vastly differed from her blockbuster past.
There was just sort of this wonderful feeling of experimentation.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Today, it is the Premier's turn to discuss strategies to avoid new tariffs from the U.S. and share their fresh ideas with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on a virtual call. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, U.S. President Donald Trump keeps repeating this 25% tariff threat. How is that affecting Canada's strategy?
Marcia, if he did proceed on February 1st, after April 1st, or at any point, it would be effectively the end of NAFTA, because it's raison d'etre. is a zero tariff zone to boost cross-border business. And without that, well, what are we even doing? BC Premier David Eby reinforced this idea that it would lead to a new era of protectionism when he said yesterday that if Trump acts on his extreme threats, his province would follow Ontario's lead and pull U.S. booze off the shelves of BC's liquor stores too.
In ordinary times, we have trade agreements with the Americans that we have to treat their products like our own. But if they're not going to abide by our trade agreements, then neither are we.
If the tariffs remain a threat that lives only in Trump's head, what his officials were instructed actually in writing Monday with respect to the NAFTA renegotiation is incredibly normal language about consulting with stakeholders, assessing its impact, reporting back to Congress. This is work that, honestly, we could have expected even Kamala Harris to be doing 1 year out from the deal's mandatory review in 2026.
And are the premiers on board with this idea, Janice?
Well, Donald Trump is not the only actor casting doubt on NAFTA's future. Remember, back in November, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that all of Canada's premiers actually support his call to not wait for 2026, but immediately set to work on negotiating a different deal with the Americans alone, cutting out Mexico, a proposal that's now morphed into Ontario government policy in the form of this Fortress Can-Am push that he's been out selling. Yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said she was worried about certain leaders trying to turn this uncertainty into their election issue. But there were fresh signs yesterday that the current chair of the premiers, Doug Ford, is considering stepping aside from that work to hit the campaign trail in Ontario in search of a new mandate.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. There are concerns mass deportations across the U.S. could begin at any time. President Donald Trump is implementing a broad, sweeping immigration plan. It means sealing off the U.S.-Mexico border and possibly raids. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from New York. And Chris, what can you tell us?
Well, President Trump has expanded the powers of immigration and customs enforcement officers, better known here as ICE. The new policy was announced by the Department of Homeland Security Tuesday and took effect immediately. It allows for expedited removal after arrest if an illegal immigrant can't prove that they've been in the country longer than 2 years. It also means that ICE can bypass court proceedings. Tom Homan, Trump's so-called border czar, was asked about raids, where and when they would happen. Here's what he said.
Well, look, I wouldn't call them raids or target enforcement operations. They know exactly who they're looking for. They know pretty much where they'll find them. So, again, these are well-planned operations. They're well investigated.
Worth noting that there are more than 250 sanctuary cities and states in the U.S. where local policies either limit cooperation with ICE officers or prohibit asking about a person's immigration status altogether. Many of these cities, like Chicago and New York, are led by Democrats, and right now they are gearing up for a fight.
Another controversial move by President Trump involves the elimination of federal programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's the latest on that?
That's right. So according to a new memo, all federal employees in DEI roles are to be placed on paid leave by tonight. Trump is also putting federal agencies on deadline to come up with a plan for firing those employees by January 31st. All DEI-related offices will shut down, and any mention of such programs will be removed from all federal websites and social media. Trump's targeting of DEI programs undoes many of President Biden's initiatives to promote inclusion within the government, including signing an executive order to assess any systemic barriers to diversity.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. President Trump says he wants an apology for what was said in a prayer service after the inauguration.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now.
Bishop Marian Edgar Buddy pleaded with the president to protect immigrants and respect LGBTQ rights. Trump was sitting in the front row of the service with Melania Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. On social media, Trump called the bishop's remarks nasty and not compelling or smart. The bishop's sermon came a day after Trump signed several executive orders on immigration and on gender. Prince Harry has settled a lawsuit against a group of UK tabloids owned by Rupert Murdoch, and in a rare move, The Duke of Sussex has received an apology. Harry claimed the publishers of The Sun and the now shuttered News of the World went to illegal extremes to gather details on his personal life. Prince Harry is one of only 2 remaining claimants in a case of more than 1,300. His lawyer says he will also receive a substantial payment. A First Nation in Northern Ontario is mourning the loss of a 10-year-old girl. She died by suicide. Her death is part of a disturbing trend. As we hear from the CBC's Sarah Law, suicide rates across the region's First Nations are on the rise.
Very friendly, always smiling, always joking, always asking those curious questions.
That's how Mishki-Gogaming's chief Merle Loon describes Janaea Skunk. Loon says the community has been open about the death of the 10-year-old in December.
We have to address this type of traumatic experience head on.
Loon says Janaea was being bullied. The region's First Nations Police Service says cyberbullying is getting worse. Since Janaea's death, Loon says more children have come forward.
It was like a release that I got to say something.
There have been more than 600 suicides in the region's First Nations since the mid-'80s. Across Canada, suicide rates are about 6 times higher for First Nations youth compared to non-Indigenous youth. Janet Gordon with the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority says First Nations need help closer to home.
Communities want to see more community-based programming.
Saul Mamakwa, Kiiwetinoong's MPP, agrees. He says taking people out of the community for care is a short-term fix.
And then when we send them back to the community, the same setting, we throw them back into the river.
Loon wants the provincial and federal governments to help build a new land-based health and treatment centre, something he's been pushing for years. Ottawa says it's working on creating a funders table to help make that happen. Meanwhile, Loon says Mishki-Gogaming is staying strong. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Canada's great at making promises to its allies, but Ukrainians are asking why one big one hasn't been kept. 2 years ago, the federal government said it would start seizing the assets from sanctioned Russians and give that money to Ukraine. That hasn't happened. The CBC's Zach Dubinsky has been asking why.
It's actually the first time that we are seizing and forfeiting assets of sanctioned individuals in Canada.
In December 2022, a groundbreaking promise. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly saying the government would become the first in the G7 to seize money from a sanctioned Russian and hand it over to Ukraine. The plan was to use the unprecedented powers Canada had given itself earlier that year to not just freeze assets, but actually take them. Joly's first target, Russian Roman Abramovich, an oligarch and close ally of President Vladimir Putin.
His $26 million American accounts will be used to compensate victims.
But 2 years later, there's been no progress. The millions of dollars still sits frozen in an account far from Kyiv. Same story for a giant Russian-owned cargo plane sitting at Toronto's main airport. It too was promised to Ukraine, but hasn't gone anywhere. Legal experts say confiscating foreign-owned property is not straightforward. Trade lawyer John Buscariol points out that Canada has an investment treaty with Russia that competes with its new asset seizure powers.
You cannot expropriate property of a Russian investor unless you compensate them for it.
Canada has committed billions to Ukraine, but says it's not obliged to get this seizure done on any timeline. Orest Zikadalski of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress says that's disappointing.
We're talking about years of, the government saying this is a priority, and then frankly not seeing much movement.
Zach Dubinsky, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, as mentioned, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. Okay, so I don't know what happened yesterday, but it was like a snowy day, and then all of a sudden it was like really almost like a mini blizzardy, right? You had like issues with visibility midday, and It's kind of crazy out there. It will be calmer today. It's warmer this morning, minus 15, but there still is drifting snow and our temperature is going to fall. So I know weather's been on a lot of people's minds. Also, what has been on a lot of people's minds is the ceasefire in Gaza. Between Gaza and Israel. So we are going to talk this hour about how to get aid and supplies to Gaza now that the ceasefire is taking hold. So stay tuned for that conversation. But up first, we begin with something much different and much brighter. The Exchange District in Winnipeg is illuminated thanks to an array of light-based art installations. We're going to get a preview of this year's Lights on the Exchange event. So stay tuned. That's coming up. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news center with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, the legacy of a 16-year-old Winnipegger is being remembered. Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or HEROES, is paying tribute to one of its youngest coaches. Trey Basarowicz died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. In his memory, hundreds of HEROES players across Canada are wearing hoodies with the letter T on their sleeves. We'll hear more coming up. And the city of Winnipeg is finally set to fill a new job Scott Gillingham promised when he ran for mayor in 2022. The city selected its first chief construction officer, a position intended to oversee major projects. We'll hear who was selected coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast. I mentioned it's a little bit better for us this morning, Abby.
A little bit better this morning, though we're seeing drifting snow, cold temperatures that would clear. The north is the coldest part of the province today. In Winnipeg, we have this light dusting of snow drifting with temperatures around minus 15 in Winnipeg. This light snow should wrap up as we get into the morning, followed by some clear conditions, though the winds will be breezy from the northwest, but will calm down as we get into the afternoon. We see temperatures falling to around minus 21, though with a wind chill this morning, it feels like minus 29. So you just want to take care of, because frostbite is still a thing. Though we don't have warnings today, but it's still cold, so you need to prepare for that. Across the province, we're looking at a chilly day with cold temperatures and clearing skies, and the north will be getting more of like that chill.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And now into the commute this morning. Corey, I always ask you if you ran in, Corey Funk.
I did.
How was it?
You know what? It was, I would say, overall not ideal. The sidewalks were still kind of covered from that snow we got yesterday, so I actually ended up running on the road. And it was a bit windy and not super fun to run in, but overall, made it. I'm alive.
which is good. We're glad.
Yeah, we are here. But I also got a call already on the commuter line from Alex. Southbound Route 90 between Taylor and Grant. There's a stalled car in the curb lane. Right now, not too many backups, but I imagine as traffic starts to pick up throughout the morning, that may start to cause some issues for folk. That's southbound Route 90 between Grant and Taylor. Curb lane is blocked, so keep left to get around that. And also, as I can imagine, with this kind of blowing snow going on out there, the perimeter highways also not ideal conditions overall. Partly covered is how a lot of highways in southern Manitoba this morning are being
described.
Described. Thank you. With some poor visibility, so be careful out there. If you see anything though going on out there, give me a call 204-788-3093.
Okay, we're actually going to add another traffic tip, because my first guest is David Pinsato, who is here to talk about lights on in the Exchange. But you were just adding that Portage was really slick, eh?
Yeah, coming in from Portage in Maine. Like right in front of Portage Place. I slid like half a block trying to stop. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. It's funny, eh? It's that light dusting of snow. It just sort of adds that little layer, and you think it's okay, but then it can happen real quick. Well, we're glad you're here too.
So am I.
The early bird gets the interview, and this one is about lights on in the Exchange. So if you haven't been to this before, this is the third annual event in the Exchange District. It started this week. It features over 25 light-based works of art that you can check out as you're basically walking through the streets of the Exchange. And so David's here to talk, obviously, about this year's installation. Is everything up yet, or are you still kind of adding as we go?
Yeah, we're kind of adding as we go. There's going to be specifically a bigger tranche that'll open up on the first Friday in March. as well. So yeah, we try to spread it out. We're the 21st of January to the 21st of March, so we like to kind of space it out a little bit.
How much do people love this? How much does it boost mood in our dark, cold, wintry days here?
A lot. I mean, the first year people didn't really quite know what's happening. It takes a little while to get that sort of critical mass. But last year we definitely heard a lot more, and this year we've had people asking lots of questions about when it's happening and what are the artworks and things. So yeah, it's growing into something that people are really looking forward to all the time.
Obviously, I want you to describe some of the things. You can match the pictures or not, but Kevin actually, while we're talking on YouTube, is rolling some of the images for us. So
that's a classic past favorite there. That one's not coming back. There's a projection piece that was the first year.
Got it. Are a lot of them projections on buildings?
There's usually between 3 and 5 that are projections. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of 3 different clusters of art. There's the projection art pieces that our friends at Manufacturing Entertainment help us to curate. Then there's artworks that are installed in storefront windows, and that's our friends at Artspace that help us to curate. And then we've got our lanterns and light boxes that were commissioned by the Winnipeg Arts Council on our behalf.
Kevin, you can just keep on rolling through as we talk here. So the lanterns and light boxes, I know there's one that's going to be coming up here because I just saw it.
Yeah.
How large are they? And those are some of my favorites because they look really intricate. They're really pretty.
Yeah, so the lanterns are, I'm really bad with sizes. I don't know, they're like 2 feet by 2 feet.
Yeah.
And those are installed on the walls of some buildings, so they kind of hang out like old style lanterns.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 larger light boxes. So they're the same format, but they're much bigger. They're a couple meters. So there's one on top of the building at Bannatyne and Main Street, where Rosé is, and that is an homage to Anne Marie Bannatyne, who was very prominent. Well, not prominent, but her story is becoming more familiar. Métis leader from before Riel, in fact. Yeah.
So you can obviously learn some of the meaning behind some of the installations as well. You have a favorite that's, I think you said, new this year?
Well, one that I'm excited about this year, yeah. It's I just want to make sure I got the name right. It's Statistical Bouquet number 4.
Okay.
The artist is Lydia Yakanowski. She's from Montreal. She's also an economist. And so what she's done is she's created this visualization. She isn't telling anyone what the numbers are from, but she works in spreadsheets and forecasts and things all day long in her day job. And then she uses all of that statistical analysis to create these sort of a mechanical sort of thing, but she creates these beautiful bouquet collages that are playing off of all of these various formulas.
Beautiful.
And that's going to
complicated.
Yeah. And then you see it, and it's this just really organic, beautiful, lush, surreal kind of. It feels very natural. Yeah.
What's the best way to take this in? Like, should people actually map out and go installation to installation, or should they just hit certain streets for sure? Like, how should they plan to take it in?
Yeah, I mean, so we do have them all mapped out. They're on our website. We've also got little handbills around the neighborhood and posters and things. So you could map it out that way. Some people do. If it's a nice night, why not? Other people have been known to, go and have a cocktail or go for dinner and then check out the ones right around there, and then maybe go to another place for dessert or something and then check out the ones around there. So really, it's dependent on your comfort level with the weather and what you're doing that night.
How do you select the works? Like, how does it all come together?
Yeah, so like I said, we've predominantly worked with those 3 different organizations. So Manufacturing Entertainment, Artspace, and Winnipeg Arts Council. We're not an arts organization; we're a business organization. So we recognize the value in having artist-run organizations select artworks. So that's we've left that process to them.
Got it. The installations, is there ever challenges with them holding up with the cold and snow? I mean, I got asked this week. It was really minus 41 with the wind chill, right? So
I will say that our maintenance crew at the Biz, they were happy for a little bit of reprieve in the cold last week, so that they could finish putting up the lantern boxes, because those are that's the challenge. It's not, they hold up fine, But standing on a ladder, dealing with sheet metal and steel is
Not
a pretty
fun.
cool job.
Right? Like no gloves in the world can give you the dexterity you need.
Yeah.
And then you got to touch. I can feel the sting. Anyone who's been out the last couple of days without gloves. There's also some that are just really simple but beautiful. Like some of my favorite things in this are just when you have like arched alleyways that just happen to have little string lights hanging all over. There's just something about light.
Yeah, it's true. And Art Space is having this, so they always have a different temporary one. I just want to make sure I've got this right. So that's one of the ones that's going to be launching on the first Friday in March. And that one's going to be, this year it's Cedar Tunnel, which is a soundscape by Mamie Griffith, along with some sort of natural scent type work. So
Why is it important to have this event? And we kind of alluded to this, but why is it important, in your view, to have this event in the winter?
Well, we saw this as an opportunity. When actually it was Eric from Art Space and myself who first started talking about this 4 years ago, and we saw this as an opportunity not only to bring some life and some art into the darkest time of the year, but also, the Exchange District is well known for its heritage buildings, its historical architecture, and in the summer we do a lot with our historic walking tours, and we thought this was a time to let artists kind of produce stuff in that context that talks about different kinds of stories and different kinds of histories that we don't normally get the opportunity to tell in the summer.
Where can people find the map?
On our website, exchangedistrict.org, it'll have the map, it'll have all the artworks and all the descriptions, so you can find them. And if you're wandering around, you will find signage by all of the artwork with a QR code that will take you right to the description of the piece as well.
Thank you so much for coming in early this morning. Drive safely back.
Great. Thank you very much.
That is David Pensado, the Executive Director of the Exchange District Biz, in early on CBC. The Lights on Exchange, as mentioned, is now on. It runs until March 21st.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
6:23 is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. And in Winnipeg, our temperature is going to fall today to minus 21, but still a lot more moderate than we've had. We do have minus 15 with drifting snow, and we're already hearing, as you may have, if you've been with us, then you've been hearing as well, that it is a little bit slick out there, so take it easy. Well, when it comes to what climate actions individuals can take, we often hear about electric vehicles or home heating, but the solutions don't always work for everyone, especially depending on where you live. That is something that CBC's Climate Solutions show called What on Earth is diving into, and that is after a listener from a rural community in Manitoba reached out. With about 20% of Canadians living in rural, remote, Indigenous, and northern communities, Rachel Sanders takes a look at what big climate action small towns are taking.
Across Canada, small communities are working on climate solutions, and those solutions are also bringing people together. Murnum, Alberta is one example. It's a village of a few hundred people about 200 kilometers east of Edmonton. People there have taken on a number of climate projects lately, and the people doing a lot of the work are teenagers.
We went to Village Council, gave them a proposal about how we could lower energy consumption in that building.
That's Eddie Balish-Dack. He's 13 years old and part of the Net Zero team at New Murnum School. That building he's talking about, it's the village's Career and Technology Education Center, aka the CTEC. Eddie and his schoolmates did an energy audit on the building, and then they spent months applying for grants. They used that grant money to put timers on the building's heating system to conserve power. Finally, they installed solar panels in the parking lot.
I knew that the CTEC was costing the village a lot of money, and I wanted to do something to help them.
That's 15-year-old Sydney Chinasek. She's on the Net Zero team too. She says young people can help with climate solutions in small communities.
The way we were able to use our school time and apply the knowledge we were learning in school to a real project that was actually helping our community.
Eddie and Sydney say in small towns, one passionate person can get big projects off the ground. In Murnum, that person is their teacher, Robert Timofeychuk, also known as Mr. T.
That is who Mr. T is for us. He comes up with these insane projects that don't even seem like they have a solution, and then somehow we end up making it happen.
As for Mr. T, he wants to help his students become the next generation of climate leaders.
These are our young people that are leaders. The future is with them.
When it comes to climate action, small communities also need to lean into their strengths. The Upper Nicola Band is a few kilometers east of Merritt in the interior of British Columbia. Chief Dan Manuel says people there see climate change up close. They've felt the effects of wildfires and floods, and drought has put pressure on their water and food security.
We do have community members that are living smack dab in the middle of all this, right?
Chief Manuel says that's why his people want to act. He says they're playing to one of their community's biggest strengths: location, location, location. One of BC's largest electrical substations is in its territory. That means the band can generate clean electricity and sell it to the province's electrical grid.
We had a unique opportunity to take our aspirations around climate change and green energy into real on-the-ground solutions.
One of those solutions is a solar project. It'll produce enough electricity to power almost 5,000 homes. It won't directly power the homes of the people who live there, but it will help BC decarbonize its electricity grid. Chief Manuel says it will strengthen his community, too. Revenue from the solar farm will go towards programs for his people.
Things like language and culture, things like education, housing.
Chief Manuel says small communities can have an impact.
There are no small contributions in this fight. Every little piece is going to matter.
Other small towns are getting into clean energy, too. Balleen, Newfoundland is one of them. It's a town of nearly 500 people on a journey towards being powered by solar. That's the long-term goal, but in the meantime, town councillor Heidi Kolodniski is always wondering,
what can we do tomorrow? Boots on the ground, shovels ready.
Balleen created a food rescue program staffed by volunteers. The town is also working to conserve some of its carbon-storing wetlands. And then there's
composting, the town's newly up and running, municipally operated community composting site.
She says the composting program prevents around 1/3 of Balleen's organic waste from being converted into methane. Heidi says climate action can bring people together, and she thinks anyone concerned about climate should get into politics. Sometimes that's easier in small towns.
One person absolutely can shift a narrative on a council.
Heidi says spending time and energy on climate action makes a difference in more ways than one.
Gathering others alongside you, it's significant. It's had a profound impact on my mental health. It changed my behavior, and it's helping change my mind, and I hope others as well.
A few lessons we can take from small Canadian towns taking big climate action: involve youth, capitalize on strengths, and take small steps. For CBC Radio, I'm Rachel Sanders.
That whole item was, sparked by a question, as we mentioned, from a listener from rural Manitoba, talking about the differences that can be made by one person taking the lead. If you want to hear What on Earth, you can hear more on that episode today at 2 o'clock right here on CBC Radio.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
You know, that question about your favorite flower and what meaning it has to you and why has really taken off. We played listener lines yesterday. We gave away some tickets to that event at the Leaf. But on Facebook, if you want to weigh in, there's just already 50 comments still that are there, which I love. Just want to share one quickly. Billy Ace saying frangipani and shares a picture here. Our apartment patio in Taiwan was bordered by these shrubs. The flowers were beautiful. The intoxicating scent would fill the night. It reminds me of good times and wonderful people that we partied with on the patio. And Crystal Simmons writing in Bird of Paradise. It grows wild and beautiful at home in Bermuda. It was one of my mummy's favorites, Crystal writes. So I just love how, flowers can evoke so many memories. Of course, it's not just the visual beauty, it's the scent. Coming up here on CBC, Christley Ramlakan's in with our business news, and she's going to be talking about the 25% tariff, the February 1st deadline, and how it could affect our economy as we get into deeper analysis. Also, just want to mention before the news here that we do have one commuter problem out there. Alex called southbound Route 90 between Taylor and Grant, a stalled car in the curb lane. So not sure yet if that's cleared. Call Corey with any updates at 788-3093. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's minus 15. You feel the difference when you step outside, and enjoy it because this mild-ish temperature is going to be short-lived. As the sky clears out today, the temperature falls to minus 21 by noon. A man with a rare degenerative disease met with Manitoba's health minister yesterday, urging them to cover a treatment that could save his life. 29-year-old Jeremy Bray has spinal muscular atrophy. It has gradually robbed him of the ability to move his muscles. Treatment can stop the disease's progression, but the drug Bray needs, risdiplam, would cost as much as $300,000 in the first year of treatment. The province has said it won't cover the drug's cost because Bray is older than Canada's drug agency's cutoff age of 25. Bray says yesterday's meeting with the health minister, Uzoma Asaguera, was productive.
The minister was very receptive to our concerns, so we really appreciate that, and hopefully we can get a solution in place as quickly as possible.
Asaguera says they have asked the national agency for an urgent review of the cutoff age. Bray's parents says he may lose all ability to talk, walk, or use his wheelchair within 6 months. A national group that mentors at-risk youth through hockey is paying tribute to one of its young coaches from Winnipeg. Heroes players at Seven Oaks Arena tapping sticks on the ice in honor of 16-year-old Trey Basarowicz. The teen coached kids with the Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or Heroes. Trey died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. Hundreds of Heroes participants across Canada are remembering him by wearing the letter T on their hoodies. Ashley Basarowicz is Trey's mother.
It's amazing. I honestly didn't realize how much of an effect he had with Hockey Heroes and just what he was doing. It just makes me feel very proud as a parent.
2 teenage boys and an 18-year-old man face second-degree murder charges in connection with Trey's death. The city of Winnipeg is finally set to fill a new job Scott Gillingham promised when he ran for mayor in 2022. The city has selected its first chief construction officer. That new position is intended to oversee major projects. A search committee selected British Columbian Tom Sparrow from a field of 44 candidates. The hire faces city council approval on January 30th. A longtime Brandon retailer says theft in that city has exponentially worsened in recent years. Brandon police say a new anti-theft blitz has, though, resulted in 70 arrests. Walter Kozier with Aurora TV and Radio Repair Shop says it has never been this bad.
People have become more brazen. They just come in and they'll just pick up something and just walk out and not even know what they're carrying out. It's not just a matter of seeking justice. It's a matter of let's eliminate the problem from the source. Is it drugs? Is it homelessness?
Brandon police say they have recovered $10,000 in stolen goods in the last few months. The city received $85,000 from the Manitoba government for this anti-theft initiative. Well, ahead of his threatened February 1st tariff deadline, U.S. President Donald Trump is again justifying the threat by claiming there are major security issues at the Canadian border.
Canada, very much so. They've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. They could have stopped them, and they didn't. And they've killed 300,000 people last year, my opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive. And people are getting killed and families are being destroyed.
Trump speaking last night in Washington. His claims, however, conflict with the latest data from American border officials. U.S. Customs says over a one-year period starting in the fall of 2023, 10,000 kilos of fentanyl was seized at American borders. Only 20 kilograms was discovered coming from Canada. Over that same period, just under 3 million people were apprehended at the U.S.-Mexico border, while less than 200,000 were detained entering from Canada. Prince Harry has settled a lawsuit against two British tabloids owned by Rupert Murdoch. The suit against the publishers of The Sun and the now shuttered News of the World claims the publications used illegal methods in reporting on Harry's life. It also alleges senior newspaper executives covered up the actions of their reporters. Prince Harry is one of only two remaining claimants in the case that began with more than 1,300. The prince has been issued an apology and is expected to receive a substantial financial settlement. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7, and you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, today does, you said it off the top of the news, but it really does feel like, okay. You know, weather-wise, it's not quite as insane out there.
Yeah, you're not being hit by that cold air as soon as you step outside.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad, though, because the temperature is going to fall. So I wish it would just stay here. This is like, okay. Abby, it's not going to fall. Well, actually, it is going to fall kind of far.
It's going to fall. But remember, I said we will be here after that temperature, that freezing conditions, the cold snap we had the past few days. And we're still here. And we'll be here tomorrow. So bring it on. No warnings today, though. We're looking at cold conditions throughout the province from the south all the way up north, while Winnipeg sees light snow clearing this morning. The north is going to be facing more like frigid temperatures and frosty winds. In Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures around minus 15 at this time. We have light snow, and that's blowing here and there this morning. That should clear up as we get towards the noon period, and then we'll see some clear skies. It will be breezy, though, with temperatures dropping to around minus 21, feeling like minus 29, with a wind chill factored in. And then tonight, it's even going to get colder as we see a low of minus 28, making the wind chill feel like minus 37. So take care out there. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley regions and Morden and surrounding areas. Temperatures also similar to Winnipeg, around minus 16 at this time. And if you're like on the Highway 75, you need to take care because we have blowing snow in that area. Heading west to Brandon, minus 13. A light snow we're seeing at this time. That should clear up by the afternoon period. Then temperature drops to minus 18. The wind chill feels like minus 27 for folks in Brandon this morning. In the Parkland region, we're seeing Dauphin around minus 16 with light snow also spotted there. That should taper off this morning. Expect a high of minus 18. In the Interlake region, Gimli sitting at minus 16, also having light snow there. That should clear up in the afternoon. Temperatures would get to around drop to minus 21. The wind chill this morning feels like minus 30. And then we move towards, north towards the powerful influence. We're looking at temperatures around minus 22 at this time. Partly cloudy skies we're seeing. The temperatures should climb to about minus 16 for folks in the Pamphlet Influence surrounding areas, though the wind chill makes it feel like minus 33 this morning. And then going farther north for Thompson and Churchill regions, we're seeing Thompson actually around minus 30 at this time. Clear conditions you're seeing. Expect sunny breaks here and there. The high will be around minus 21, though the wind chill for folks in Thompson, it feels like minus 42 this morning, so frostbite is a thing. While in Churchill, we're seeing ice crystals and temperatures around minus 22. Expect a high of minus 21. The wind chill for Churchill today feels like minus 38, and it's going to stay cold all day. So down south, the day will be cold. The light snow is going to clear while the north is experiencing colder temperatures.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
I love that Abby's all like, I won't back down. Right?
I will be here.
Yeah, exactly. So will we. All right, Corey, what's up with the slippery drive?
Yeah, only heard of one issue to keep an eye out for out there. I got a call from Alex. Southbound Keniston between Taylor and Grant. This was probably just about 40 minutes ago. May still be an issue. There's a stalled car in the curb lane, so keep left to get around that if it is still there. That's southbound Keniston between Taylor and Grant. Other than that, just might be some blustery conditions out there. Seeing a lot of highways including the perimeter and around Winnipeg through the Interlake, being reported as partly covered with some poor visibility. So if you are hitting the highways today, just take care out there, but not ideal conditions. If you see something going on, though, give me a call. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk to Crystal Ramlakan next on our show about business news this morning. Hello to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So February 1st is going to come pretty fast here. U.S. President Donald Trump has put that date out, saying he's thinking that's when he's going to hit Canada with the 25% tariffs. We've had a couple days now to gather reaction. How would that affect our economy?
Well, a new report from CIBC says sweeping tariffs imposed by the U.S. could cost the Canadian economy as much as 3.25%, even factoring in possible exemptions for the oil and gas sector. So the new analysis examines 4 potential scenarios in which U.S. President Donald Trump slaps new taxes on goods imported from Canada, ranging from 10 to 20%, and with possible carve-outs for key industries. So the report says a 20% tariff that excludes commodities, which actually make up around half of Canadian exports to the U.S., would still result in a GDP hit of 3.25%. Under a more conservative scenario, where only a 10% tariff is applied and excludes both commodities and the auto sector, the impact to the Canadian economy would be a little bit better, around 1.35%. So that hypothetical would actually exempt roughly 60% of Canadian exports to the U.S., and the report suggests that the Trump administration might not want to tax those sectors as they rely heavily on close integration with Canadian counterparts. So it noted that the oil and gas and auto sectors represent 28 and 14% respectively of total Canadian exports to the U.S. And the report says that these tariffs could actually end up costing American jobs.
Let's go to another story. Netflix is raising its prices again, right?
Yes, so the streaming service is increasing its prices after reporting its biggest ever subscriber jump. So Netflix added 18.9 million subscribers in its holiday quarter, blowing past Wall Street forecasts with live sporting events and the return of the popular South Korean series Squid Game, which attracted a record number of new customers. So the streaming giant says it will increase prices for most services in Canada, the U.S., Portugal, and Argentina as it spends more on programming. So the monthly cost of its cheapest offering in Canada, that's the standard plan with ads, is going up $2 to $7.99 a month. The standard plan without ads is increasing $2.50 a month to $18.99, and the premium plan is going to go up $3 to $23.99. So David Friend is an entertainment reporter at the Canadian Press, and he says as sports weren't part of Netflix's business model before, they've gained a whole new segment of viewers.
These packages, they are, anyone who subscribes to them knows they've been getting more and more expensive since the start of the pandemic. And eventually they are going to start looking like cable. I've heard for years people saying my group of streaming packages feel a lot like my cable bundle once did. But now I'm telling you, I think Netflix, that price is just going to keep going up and up and up. And the more popular it is, the more they can lock you in and the more you're going to be paying.
So the new prices take effect immediately for new subscribers, while existing members will see the change on their next bill. But you know what? Investors have actually reacted enthusiastically to these latest results. And over the past year, Netflix shares have gained more than 77%.
And let's go to another story before the markets this morning. Why are U.S. business groups warning the CRTC about CanCon rules?
So groups representing U.S. businesses and big tech companies are warning the CRTC that its efforts to modernize Canadian content rules could worsen trade relations with the U.S. So they say that the CRTC's measures to implement the Online Streaming Act, which updated broadcasting laws to capture online platforms could lead to retaliation from the U.S. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has taken aim at an earlier decision by the CRTC under the Online Streaming Act to require big foreign streaming companies to contribute money toward the creation of Canadian content. And the streamers are challenging that decision in federal court. And the Chamber says the Online Streaming Act is adding to mounting trade frictions and is likely to trigger retaliation under the Canada-US-Mexico agreement.
What's up in the numbers this morning then, Crystal?
So in Europe, stocks are higher. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mixed, with stocks in China declining with the threat of tariffs from the US. So right now, Japan is up, but Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is up 9 cents to $75.92 US per barrel. Gold is up $9 to $2,753.50 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.06 of a cent to 69.9 cents US.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Ramlicam with our business news. 6:45 a.m. live from downtown Winnipeg. This is CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. And Corey Funk is covering the commute as always and in with some updates.
Yeah, I just got a bunch of calls. One from Anne who said there's a multi-vehicle collision southbound Main Street right after the bridge just before Marion in the far left lane. So keep right to get around that. You can still turn left onto Marion. So that may cause some backups though. Also, someone did confirm that there is still the car. It's actually an accident on southbound Route 90 between Taylor and Grant, blocking the curb lane. That'll probably going to start causing some backups pretty soon. And just a reminder from Brad, he was calling. He was going westbound Highway 1 right around the turnoff to Carmen. He says there's some drifting snow that is coming right into the slow lane, so that right lane there. So you kind of have to skirt around that. So be real careful there as you're driving today. You may have to slow down, especially if you're in that fast lane. Look out for people who have to skirt around those drifting snow there. If you see something else going on, though, do give me a call. Keep them coming. That number, 204-788-3093.
The calls do keep coming, actually. Abby's been on the phone while you've been talking here, Corey, and we're just getting calls, people that are saying that in the city, it's very slippery, like all over very slippery. Specifically, Tim called from Logan right now, and we heard our earlier guest saying he slid half a block. And this is people that are, driving slowly to begin with and then kind of caught off guard by how far they're going to slide. So it's just one of those mornings. It's slick. The snow's dusted it up. The sand, obviously, maybe they need to redo it or get out there again, but it's one of those slick mornings. So thank you very much, Corey, for the reports. Thanks to everyone who's been calling the commuter line. Keep those calls coming with any updates as well at 788-3093. Well, we've got a bit of music from Weather Station. This tune's called Mirror. And if you have been excited going to the new year, and you're a regular listener, you know that we have been playing you albums to be excited about. CBC's list of 22 albums that they say we can't wait to hear. They range from a whole bunch of different types of music from Canadian musicians. So that's where this comes from. Weather Station and Mirror.
Signals come in, and it all rising from the fires of the world. You were dousing your fears in a chemical rain. You were caught in my arm to transcend your own pain. All but God's and you were everything is calm and mirror. Everything slips. Silver unknown from the lens of your eye, as if into proof. Back up again to rise and come back.
She's got a bit of a Sarah McLachlan vibe going on there, eh? Mirror by Weather Station. Her album's called Humanhood. It's featured on CBC Music's list of 22 albums that you can't wait to hear in 2025. 10 to 7 right now. Slick out there. Light snow and drifting snow. Minus 15 degrees in Winnipeg. In Brandon, light snow minus 13. Up in Thompson, clear sky and minus 30. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. And next, the ceasefire in the Middle East went into effect on Sunday. Part of the agreement was allowing a much-needed increase of aid into the Gaza Strip. Now, the United Nations is reporting that hundreds of trucks a day have begun crossing into the territory. One of the groups that's been prepping and waiting for this opportunity is Oxfam Canada. Dalia Alaquati is the head of humanitarian affairs, and she is with us right now from Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning.
What are you hearing from people on the ground there?
We're hearing a lot of relief that the ceasefire is in effect. So certainly relief from the incessant violence that people have experienced over the past 15 months. But we are also hearing that there is an increased amount of aid that is entering Gaza, which of course is really highly needed, particularly on the heels of the 15 months of total destruction, and then, of course, the almost 18 years of land, sea, and air blockade. It gives Israel total control over what and who enters Gaza.
How freely are trucks and supplies being making their way into the Strip? Like over the last 3 days, what's that looked like?
So there's a massive increase compared to what was, first of all, what was happening, what was entering over the past 15 months, but even prior to that. But really the destruction that is on the ground in Gaza is so immense that both the destruction and the needs are so immense that it's really hard to think that it would meet the needs that exist. Aid delivery continues. There's actually physical limitations on how much can come in and how much can move around because of this near total destruction of key infrastructure. So roads are really hard to travel. Rubble is everywhere in Gaza. There's almost 90% of the strip is actually damaged or destroyed. So really, really difficult circumstances, quite frankly.
What's been allowed to make its way in? Obviously, there's reports of widespread hunger and malnutrition. Tell me a little bit about the most critical supplies.
So we know that more food has been allowed to make its way in. Some, water, some other essential supplies have been making their way through. But there continue to be heightened restrictions on items that Israel would consider dual use. So for, just as an example, recognizing that water systems are, almost obliterated there, things like pipes for water infrastructure, some health supplies, those are still not being allowed in as we speak. So while we see an increase in certain types of food and basic items coming in, there's still the need is so big and the infrastructure is so damaged that some of the critical supplies that are necessary for recovery still aren't making it through.
And not making it through because of what you've addressed there, because it's difficult to navigate the terrain?
Well, partially because it's difficult to navigate the terrain, but actually really because they're actually not allowed in. They're barred from entry.
What are the unique challenges of getting supplies to the north of Gaza, where the need, I understand, is the greatest right now?
Yeah, so the challenges both across the Gaza Strip, but then also in the north is the damage, the destruction, the rubble, but then the reality that people are moving from one. A lot of people are, if they're able to get to their homes, are trying to go check on their houses. There are still restrictions on movement within Gaza. So, for example, people aren't really able to go back to Gaza City. So again, assistance is arriving across a lot of Gaza, but it's nowhere near meeting the scale of need. And the factors that really determine safety of humanitarian delivery, while they're more in place than they have been in the past 15 months, it still feels, to be quite frank, shaky at best.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Is there anything I haven't asked you about specifically that you feel is important to share with us today?
I think, I really want to say that, the ceasefire brings a big sense of relief, but we know that it really must become a permanent one, and one that leads to real and lasting change. And that means a permanent end to the Israeli occupation, the siege of Gaza. Diplomatic pressure on Israel to respect international law and allow Gaza to rebuild is really quite critical. And again, this sense of relief is really important, but we currently are seeing a serious deterioration in the conditions in the West Bank and the occupied Palestinian territories. So we're really hopeful, not hopeful, but we want to keep our eyes on the situation. We want to make sure that people are receiving assistance, but that also international law is respected, humanitarian law is respected as well. So it's an improvement, but we don't feel like we're out of the woods, quite simply.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
That's Dalia Alakati. She's the head of humanitarian affairs at Oxfam Canada. We reached her this morning in Toronto, but she was talking about what's going on in the ground there. She's been in conversation, obviously, coordinating with her different workers that are there. We will get into weather and the morning commute, which is very challenging, to say the least, from what we're hearing. Really slick out there in a moment. I just want to mention that if you're around University of Manitoba, please say hi to our colleagues from CBC that are down there as well. Communities in Focus is on campus at University of Manitoba this week and next, focusing on Gen Z. In fact, Up to Speed is going to be doing a live broadcast from there this afternoon from on campus at UofM. And then next Tuesday, we have a town hall that's going to be specifically sort of an open discussion with international students, specifically talking about their lives in Manitoba, their lives at UofM, challenges and different things coming up. So that's coming up next Tuesday. But Communities in Focus, of course, runs this week and next, as we mentioned. One of the things that I want to mention is that the where you want to find us is the Fort Garry campus, UMSU University Centre. The Fireside Lounge is kind of where we're mostly going to be around. So that's where our welcome event was, if you made it there this week. And that's where our live shows are going to be as well. So do enjoy watching the show and have a coffee and a donut and check it out this afternoon, as Up to Speed is going to be live with Faith Fundal at the University of Manitoba. Right now, let's find out at 3 minutes to 7 o'clock what is making news headlines this morning. Hi, Heather.
Good morning. Hi. Well, the city of Winnipeg is finally set to fill a new job the mayor promised when he ran back in 2022. The city has selected its first chief construction officer. The new position is intended to oversee major projects in this city. And the selected person is from BC. We're going to hear more about that. And Brandon police are hailing a new anti-theft initiative as a success. The provincially funded crackdown was resulted in 70 arrests in its first few months in Brandon, and the city received $85,000 from the province for the anti-theft initiative. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the commute, 2 accidents that we're hearing about, 2 collisions, one heading southbound Main Street just before Marion, collision blocking the far left lane. There's another collision blocking the curb lane on northbound Kenniston between Taylor and Grant. Keep left there. And then we're hearing about snowdrifts kind of creeping onto the right lane on westbound Highway number 1 around the turnoff to Carmen. And we're just hearing from people calling from the city saying, look, it's slippery. I'm sliding around out there and I thought I gave myself room to brake. So take it easy. Note that and enjoy the warmer temperature. 788-3093. That warmer temperature is minus 15, but we're going to fall to minus 21 today. Periods of light snow that are dusting the roadways are going to end sometime later this morning. Well, coming up on the program, we're going to talk to a strategist about how opposition leader Pierre Poilievre is responding to President Trump's tariff threats and if he needs to change up his game plan. So stay tuned for that. A bit of political discussion as things are continually changing this week. Also, over the next few weeks, you can see a rare astronomical event. Coming up, we're going to learn about the planetary parade. And then at 10 to 8 this morning, conversations around President Donald Trump's executive orders. They're sure to spark some questions around the dinner table in your household. How do you navigate them with the family? Stay tuned.
Today on The Current.
Bashar al-Assad is no longer Syria's dictator. Russia says he's now in exile in Moscow.
There are hopes and fears for Syria's new government after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, but Syrian women in particular are determined to play a central role in shaping their country and creating a future that works for them. Their stories coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Possible U.S. tariffs are the priority conversation today in Canadian boardrooms, manufacturing plants, and the Prime Minister's office. Justin Trudeau has heard from his cabinet, including Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, who is just back from Washington.
I was so happy to remind them every time I go there, the governor said, by the way, 80% of all the semiconductor manufactured in the United States are packaged and tested in Canada.
The Prime Minister has also heard from business leaders and automotive union leader Flavio Volpe. He played a big role the last time Canada had to negotiate a deal with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Well, what we don't do is panic. So at the very least, we know the math and science that he has available to him. The art? Well, the art is a little bit of a dance, and he's a pretty good dancer, and we'll figure out who amongst us can keep up.
Later today, Trudeau will once again talk strategy with Canada's premiers, but when it comes to fighting back against U.S. tariffs, British Columbia's premier says everyday Canadians have a role to play too. Mira Baines reports.
BC Premier David Eby says people should use their purchasing power to stand up for Canada.
And we will not spend money in a country that wants to do economic harm to Canadians.
U.S. President Donald Trump suggested Monday that 25% tariffs on Canadian goods could take effect as soon as February 1st. Eby told British Columbians to carefully consider where they're taking their vacations and what country they're buying products from.
Our decision not to purchase American alcohol would definitely send a message. It is one of the things that could be on the table to respond to these tariffs. They are completely unjustified.
Other ways BC could retaliate, Eby says, is charging U.S. trucks to drive through Canada to get to Alaska or banning American companies from bidding on BC infrastructure projects. Carleton University professor of public policy Ian Lee says Canada should be open to a deal.
We will get squashed in any trade war because they are vastly more powerful. What we should be doing is, yes, discussing and talking to the governors and the senators. And how about talking to the Trump White House?
Eby will be part of a joint mission of Canadian premiers heading to Washington, D.C. for trade talks on February 12th. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Donald Trump's second term as president is making waves around the world. He has already withdrawn the U.S. from several international agreements. As we hear from the CBC's Lisa Sheng, this could be opening the door for China on the global stage.
China's Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, saying the country is a staunch supporter of true multilateralism, that it upholds the international system and maintains the international order based on international law, the message that it's a team player, and it's echoed elsewhere. By China's foreign ministry expressing concern over U.S. President Donald Trump withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. And in a strategically timed meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin just hours after Trump's inauguration, Chinese President Xi Jinping saying he will guide China-Russia relations to a new height this year in response to external uncertainties. A clear sign China is positioning itself as a world leader, according to Gregory Chin, political economy professor at York University. He says other countries have a choice to make.
It's choosing between aligning themselves with America or some multipolar set of options. Inadvertently, the Trump administration may be weakening America's positioning in the world relative to China.
As Trump threatens higher tariffs, China is reducing them. Chin says that's one reason other nations may bolster relations with the country while the U.S. distances itself. Lisa Sheng, CBC News, Toronto.
A First Nation in Northern Ontario is mourning the loss of a 10-year-old girl. She died by suicide. Her death is part of a disturbing trend. As we hear from the CBC's Sarah Loss, suicide rates across the region's First Nations are on the rise.
Very friendly, always smiling, always joking, always asking those curious questions.
That's how Mishki Gogoming's chief Merle Loon describes Janaea Skunk. Loon says the community has been open about the death of the 10-year-old in December.
We have to address this type of traumatic experience head on.
Loon says Janaea was being bullied. The region's First Nations Police Service says cyberbullying is getting worse. Since Janaea's death, Loon says more children have come forward.
It was like a release that I got to say something.
There have been more than 600 suicides in the region's First Nations since the mid-'80s. Across Canada, suicide rates are about 6 times higher for First Nations youth compared to non-Indigenous youth. Janet Gordon with the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority says First Nations need help closer to home.
Communities want to see more community-based programming.
Saul Mamakwa, Kiiwatinon's MPP, agrees. He says taking people out of the community for care is a short-term fix.
And then when we send them back to the community, the same setting, we throw them back into the river.
Loon wants the provincial and federal governments to help build a new land-based health and treatment centre, something he's been pushing for years. Ottawa says it's working on creating a funders table to help make that happen. Meanwhile, Loon says Mishki Gogoming is staying strong. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
This is day 2 of an Israeli military operation in the occupied West Bank. The IDF posted this video online saying airstrikes hit terrorist infrastructure in Jenin. The military also says it destroyed explosive devices planted on roads. Palestinian Health Services said at least 9 Palestinians have been killed, 35 others have been injured. Adel Bashar is a resident of Jenin. He says the Israeli military is trying to make up for what it failed to achieve in Gaza. He says it is trying to eliminate the resistance in the West Bank. A rare scene on the beaches of northern Florida. People line the shores near Panama City to watch the snow. A historic winter storm is making its way across the U.S. Gulf Coast. States of emergency have been declared in Florida, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. At least 4 deaths are being blamed on the storm. Some 31 million people are under a snowstorm warning. It covers a stretch from southern Texas through to Florida and up into Virginia. Netflix is raising subscription rates in a number of countries, starting with Canada, the U.S., Argentina, and Portugal. The cheapest offering is going up by $2 to $7.99 per month. That is for the standard plan with ads. The premium plan is increasing by $3 a month. Netflix added nearly 19 million subscribers in the final months of last year, thanks in part to the second series of South Korean drama entitled Squid Game, and the boxing match between Mike Tyson and influencer-turned-fighter Jake Paul. Canada is great at making promises to its allies, but Ukrainians are asking why one big one hasn't been kept. 2 years ago, the federal government said it would start seizing the assets from sanctioned Russians and give that money to Ukraine. That hasn't happened. The CBC's Zach Dubinsky has been asking why.
It's actually the first time that we are seizing and forfeiting assets of sanctioned individuals in Canada.
In December 2022, a groundbreaking promise. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly saying the government would become the first in the G7 to seize money from a sanctioned Russian and hand it over to Ukraine. The plan was to use the unprecedented powers Canada had given itself earlier that year to not just freeze assets, but actually take them. Joly's first target, Russian Roman Abramovich, an oligarch and close ally of President Vladimir Putin.
His $26 million American accounts will be used to compensate victims.
But 2 years later, there's been no progress. The millions of dollars still sits frozen in an account far from Kyiv. Same story for a giant Russian-owned cargo plane sitting at Toronto's main airport. It too was promised to Ukraine, but hasn't gone anywhere. Legal experts say confiscating foreign-owned property is not straightforward. Trade lawyer John Buscariol points out that Canada has an investment treaty with Russia that competes with its new asset seizure powers.
You cannot expropriate property of a Russian investor unless you compensate them for it.
Canada has committed billions to Ukraine, but says it's not obliged to get this seizure done on any timeline. Orest Zikadalski of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress says that's disappointing.
We're talking about years of, the government saying this is a priority, and then frankly not seeing much movement.
Zach Dubinsky, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is World Report for this hour. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is really sort of blustery out there. We've been getting a lot of calls about how slick it is, and there's some accidents. So take it easy. A little warmer this morning, though, in downtown Winnipeg. That's where we're sitting, and you are listening to Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube, and this hour on the program. Over the next few weeks, you can look up and see a rare astronomical event. We're going to hear more about the planetary parade. Also, all these executive orders that are being laid out by President Donald Trump now might be difficult for people to navigate. How does that conversation look around your dinner table in your family? So stay tuned. We're actually going to have that conversation, so stay tuned for that. And then right away, in a few moments, we're going to have a strategist on to talk about how opposition leader Pierre Poilievre is responding to President Trump's tariff threats and if he needs to change his game plan. So stay tuned. Right now, Heather Wells is in with Developing News. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the legacy of a 16-year-old Winnipegger is being remembered. Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or HEROES, has been paying tribute to one of its youngest coaches. Trey Basarowicz died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. In his memory, hundreds of HEROES players right across Canada are wearing hoodies with the letter T on their sleeves. We'll hear more coming up. And a Rivers family hopes for quick action after meeting with Manitoba's health minister yesterday, urging them to cover a life-saving treatment. 29-year-old Jeremy Bray has spinal muscular atrophy. The rare disease has robbed him of the ability to control his body, and the drug that can stop the progression could cost as much as $300,000 in its first year. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Abby for the actual forecast.
A chilly day across board, light snow in Winnipeg that should taper off, and then we'll see some clear conditions. We'll see temperatures dropping to around minus 21. Right now we are at minus 16 and light snow and drifting snow in the city.
All right, that's causing some issue out there on the commute, Corey.
Yeah, there's actually a few issues to keep an eye out for. So most recently, actually, there is a hydro outage in St. Vital right now, and actually two intersections are without power. So that's the intersection of St. Mary's and Britannica, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista. So those are blank intersections, so they're not even flashing. So you want to treat those as a four-way stop. So be careful going through there. Keep your wits about you. St. Mary's and Britannica and Dakota and Nova Vista are totally out because of a hydro outage. As well, all morning there's been an issue at Keniston approaching Grant, heading northbound on Keniston. There's a multi-vehicle collision blocking the curb lane. Keep left to get around that. That could be causing some backups for folks. Also heard earlier from Ann, southbound Main Street, approaching Marion in the far left lane. There's been a collision, so keep right to get around that. And just one final thing here as well. Bison, just east of Markham, right by the superstore there, the lights are flashing red from an earlier collision. So you want to treat that as a four-way stop as well. So lots going on out there, hearing about very slick conditions here in the city and out on the highways, and even some snow drifts on westbound Highway 1 around the turnoff to Carmen. So be careful. If you see anything else going on, though, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, President Trump's tariff threat is back on the radar of Canadian politicians, threatening to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods on February 1st. We continue to talk about this because that date is very close. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre released a statement in response. He blamed the Liberals, saying, quote, "Common sense Conservatives are calling for Trudeau to reopen Parliament now to pass new border controls, agree on trade retaliation, and prepare a plan to rescue Canada's weak economy." end quote. And I should reframe that. I don't think the word blaming the Liberals is quite correct there, but that is the specific statement that he put out. Kate Harrison's vice chair at Summa Strategies, a government relations and communications firm based in Ottawa. She thinks Poilievre's statement is a mature response to the threat and not reactionary, and she's here to explain. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you?
I'm well. So tell me a little bit about what you mean by a mature response.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Pierre Poilievre remains the opposition leader. He's not the prime minister. And so coming up with a detailed plan for Canada how should respond to tariffs is not his place. That's the place of the Prime Minister. And so I think it's practical to try and address the elephant in the room, which is the border. There was consensus amongst all of the opposition parties at the end of last year that we did need a plan for the border. The Liberals proposed $1.3 billion in new border spending, but then that plan effectively was torpedoed with prorogation. So I think that Poilievre is saying, listen, let's all get back to the table, have a discussion around the border, which we know is an irritant for Trump, and then we can have a more reasonable conversation around tariffs. But until we address that, we're going to be having a very lopsided conversation.
What do you think about Poilievre also making another statement where he said that Canada has never been so weak? There's a lot of talk about the need to be unified across the country right now. So how might that affect the conversations as we're thinking about our country in the States?
Yeah, I think there's two things that can be true here. The first is that Trump is being heavy-handed with Canada, and these tariffs are not justified. And Poilievre said that they were not justified yesterday, and that we need to have a response that defends Canada's interests. But it's also fair and true to point out that this situation did not happen overnight. The deterioration of the relationship with the U.S. is not something that happened in 24 hours. I would say that, successive poor economic policies, lack of investment in the border, lack of investing in Canada's defense spending at the NATO table, for instance. These are all things that have really contributed to the deterioration of that relationship. So we can't be surprised that we are in this vulnerable state. And I think we do need to take some ownership, yes, over how that relationship has gone, and it has not gone well. But also we need to be thinking bigger picture here in terms of what we can do to stand up an economy that is less vulnerable to these threats from the U.S. and allows Canada to be a little bit more self-sufficient.
We were mentioning, your thoughts on what Poilievre said being a mature response. I understand when you look at the Liberal response, you'd characterize it as reactionary. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I think that it's clear to me, based on how the Liberals have managed the relationship with Trump before he was elected, in terms of, taking out social media ads that painted Trump as a boogeyman. You had Chrystia Freeland standing up in the House just 2 weeks prior to his reelection, calling conservatives maple MAGA, and that was not a term of endearment, Marcy, when she was using it. So I think that they were very content for a long time to make Donald Trump out to be the enemy. And now they are trying to say that we are best friends again. You can understand that given he tends to be a bit of a petty person, that is not landing so well. So I don't think that we were prepared. And I would also say that we haven't done enough over the course of years to make Canada an attractive place to do business. The carbon tax is a big part of that equation. It's a significant reason why companies are going to the U.S. And looking to stand up jobs there as opposed to here in Canada. So not only did we poke Donald Trump in the eye repeatedly, that's what the Liberals chose to do for domestic political gain, but they also did not work to make our economy more resilient, make Canada a better place to do business, and that has made us all the more reliant on the U.S. in this time.
What do you make of all of the name calling on all sides right now by our federal politicians of each other?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is driven from the bottom up, a lot of the tone in politics. I see a lot of leaders responding to the frustrations that they see Canadians facing. I think that it goes on all sides of the aisle, and not just one party is guilty of that. And voters will ultimately decide whether or not the tone is important to them when they cast their ballots. I think what will end up overshadowing that is who's putting forward policies and ideas that are better resonating with Canadians. I think ultimately that idea, those policies are going to be what wins the day as opposed to the conversation around tone.
I want to talk about something developing this morning. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the tariff threat is a tactic by Trump to begin renegotiating the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. And that, is coming up for discussion in next week. If that's true, how do you expect, because we've been focusing on Poilievre, how do you expect Poilievre to react to it?
Yeah, I think part of the issue right now is we see too many people reacting to the Trump news cycle and not dealing with some of the fundamentals. And the fundamental that we have right before us is our weak border. So let's start there. Let's make sure that we recall Parliament and have a discussion and a debate about whether or not our border response is sufficient. Again, this is something that all the parties had agreed to prior to prorogation. So let's start there before trying to have a longer conversation around USMCA. I think there's probably things that would benefit both sides of that agreement in order to strengthen it. But we have to deal with what is right before us and not, I think, give in to the Trump media cycle and having him drive the narrative. Let's focus on what we can control right now, which is our response to the border. And that's why I think the plan to recall Parliament, the proposal to do that, is a reasonable one for the Conservatives to make.
Kate, thanks for your analysis today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcy. Take care now.
That is Kate Harrison, Vice Chair at Summa Strategies. We will just mention here that Summa is a government relations and communication firm. They are based in Ottawa. And when it comes to, the narrative and in what Canada is saying, a big part of this is the premiers. They will be meeting with Justin Trudeau, in fact, today, as you've been hearing on World Report, and they will be talking about, from their point of view, what we should be discussing in terms of any retaliation efforts to push back against this tariff threat. So stay tuned.
Ice on the rocks as a dessert.
Yummy.
Made into sculptures. Healing injuries.
Ouch.
A Batman villain.
The Iceman cometh. Ice, ice, baby.
But our obsession with ice as a product is only 200 years old. How ice transformed our lives on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
Well, the ice baby is not cooperating this morning. People are sliding around and calling us. We've got problems in traffic. Please update any of the situations that Corey's been mentioning. It's 788-3093. Southbound Route 90 between Taylor and Grant. And Corey's actually popping in right now because he has some updates. Where else are the big spots, Corey, that have been, really problematic today?
Yeah, so there's actually a power outage in South St. Vital right now. It's actually got two intersections completely out. So St. Mary's and Britannica is completely out, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista, those lights out. And I actually heard from Allison there's a collision just after St. Mary's and on St. Mary's, just past Britannica. A car has actually kind of gone up. Apparently it seems to have flipped and hit a pole, and it's blocking the right lane. So be careful out there. Seems like I don't know what caused it, but just heads up there if you are heading down and through South St. Vital today down to St. Mary's. There's a couple of intersections that are out, and it's also slick, so be careful.
There's a broken down semi also in the turning lane westbound. This is at Fermor and Lage. So Jonathan's just calling us. Abby's whispering my ear. So
okay.
Thank you, Jonathan. Broken down semi westbound Fermor at Lage. Lots going on, as we said.
Yeah, keep those calls coming. Also a reminder, northbound Kinnaston just before Grant, there's also been a collision that is blocking the curb lane there as well. So keep left to get around that, causing some backups for folks too.
Winter. Hello.
Yeah.
Sports coming up in a couple of minutes. First, I love a good cover. I've always been a sucker for a good cover tune. Here's one from Noah Dirksen, who is a Winnipeg singer-songwriter. Said he grew up with Macy Gray in her 1999 hit, and so he's covering it. This is I Try, the Noah Dirksen version, on CBC, 7:23 a.m.
Games, changes, and fear. When will they go from here? When will they stop? I believe that fate has brought us here, and we should be together, babe, but we're not. I play it off, but I'm dreaming of you. I'll keep my cool, but I'm feeling. I try to say goodbye and I choke. I try to walk away and I stumble. Though I try to hide it, it's clear my world crumbles when you are not near. I may appear to be free, but I'm just a prisoner of your love. And I may seem alright and smile when you leave, but my smile is just a front. It's just a front. I play it off, but I'm dreaming of you. I keep my cool, but I'm feeling. I try to say goodbye.
Are you singing along, Scott Regehr? Can you name that tune by
not
Macy
out loud
Gray?
because my ears couldn't handle my own voice. But I listened to Abby do his rendition. Wasn't anything wrong with that at all.
Yeah, Abby always gets Scott in the line, and I was singing along here. I, with all due respect to Macy Gray, and I totally respect her tune, right? I try.
Yeah.
I like this cover.
Yeah, I mean, two very different approaches to it.
So different, but it makes you lean into the lyrics. That's what I like about covers sometimes, especially if they slow them down, right? You can kind of go, oh, yeah.
That's what she said in the original, yeah.
Right? Lyrically cool. All right, let's fade that out. That's Noah Dirksen from Winnipeg, and as we mentioned, a cover of Macy Gray's I Try. Well, let's turn to sports. Let's start with basketball. It was a tale of two halves for the Raptors last night.
All very Jekyll and Hyde, Marcy. In the first half, Toronto trailed by as many as 21 against Orlando, and then in the second, the Raptors completely turned things around and ended up winning by 16 in the end. Toronto did it by committee with key bench contributions by the Canadian Kelly Olynyk and by Bruce Brown. And Brown's 15 points come at a time when he's once again dealing with trade rumors ahead of the NBA deadline, and he was asked about that.
Last year was super tough. I was saying, I didn't care about it, but I did. It was tough just knowing if I was going to be here or not, or if I was going to stay in the hotel. So, but now it's like it's part of the business. And through the summer, I knew at some point I was going to face this again, just being on an expiring deal on a young team. But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, the life of a pro athlete before the trade deadline. In the NBA's case, Marcy, that's coming up pretty quickly on February the 6th.
Let's go to tennis. We're now nearing the end of the Australian Open.
We are, with top seed Jannik Sinner making a very short work of Alex de Minaur this morning and booking a spot in the men's semifinals. Sinner will take on American Ben Shelton next. Meantime, in the women's draw, Marcy, Iga Swiatek continues to run roughshod over her opponents. The Polish star still hasn't lost a set in Melbourne after she beat American Emma Navarro today. During one rally in their match, a ball bounced twice before Swiatek returned it and eventually won the point. The rules at the Aussie Open dictate that when there's a question over whether there's been a double bounce, the player who's been affected has to stop play immediately and ask for a review. Navarro says that left her second-guessing herself in the midst of her rally.
In the moment, it happened so fast. I don't know if she knew or not. It's going to be a downer if I stop the point and it turns out it wasn't a double bounce. So it's tough to place blame on anybody. It's a tough call, and I think the rules should be different. That I think for sure we should be able to look at it afterwards and decide.
Now, although the Aussie Open uses video replays to ensure calls are made correctly in a number of circumstances, that does not yet include reviewing a double bounce after the rally has finished. I have to say the technophobe in me, Marcy, appreciates that there's still some place for human error in Melbourne.
Let's end with baseball, where the latest members of the Hall of Fame have been announced. What stands out for you?
Human error. How else do you explain a writer leaving Ichiro Suzuki off the ballot? Suzuki, Marcy, arguably the best pure hitter the sport has ever seen, received 394 votes by the Baseball Writers Association. This is the same thing that happened to Yankees legend Derek Jeter. And although we don't know who the lone dissenting voter was there either, it does smack of a rival team's, say, the Red Sox beat writer. and sour grapes. So figure out who Ichiro's Mariners' biggest rivals were during his heyday, and that probably will lead you to a conclusion. That heyday, by the way, included Ichiro setting an almost century-old record for hits in a season. He had 262 during one campaign. That's tough to fathom when you consider 200 is considered the holy grail for contact hitters these days. Ichiro's consistency is down to his intense attention to detail, and that includes, according to broadcaster Bob Costas, thinking through even the most un-baseball-like scenarios.
I'd ask him, who wins a fight, King Kong or Godzilla? And this was his actual answer. Oh, King Kong is formidable, you know, but Godzilla breathes fire. And that would be the deciding factor, as the ape would be consumed in the conflagration. That's what Ichiro said.
The ever-thoughtful Ichiro Suzuki to become the first Japanese player enshrined in Cooperstown in July. I have a strong feeling he won't be the last. The Jets, meanwhile, they're in Colorado tonight, 8:30 puck drop. Last time these two teams met in the last couple of weeks, Connor Hellebuck shut him out. We'll see whether he can do the same this evening.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott.
You bet.
That's Scott Regehr with our morning sports on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on the show. It is, as we continue to tell you, slick out there. Update anything if you need. And we'll have more on your weather today after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 16 right now, and this is just the beginning of a slide. The temperature is going to keep falling to minus 21 this afternoon as the sky clears out. The legacy of a 16-year-old Winnipegger is being remembered. Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or HEROES, paying tribute to one of its youngest coaches. Trey Basarowicz died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. In his memory, hundreds of HEROES players right across Canada are wearing hoodies with his initial, the letter T, on their sleeves. Jordan Curtin and Trey grew up in HEROES together. She says they both share the same number on their jerseys.
I do carry that. I don't find it personally more as a tribute, more of just me carrying him with me. Like if I'm on the ice and wearing a number, I know he's skating with me. And that always gives me a push, makes me want to do better.
Two teenage boys and an 18-year-old man face second-degree murder charges in connection with Trey's death. A Rivers family met with Manitoba's health minister yesterday, urging them to cover a life-saving treatment. 29-year-old Jeremy Bray has spinal muscular atrophy. The rare disease has robbed him of the ability to control his body. The drug that can stop the progression could cost as much as $300,000 in the first year of treatment. But the province has said it will not pay for the drug because Bray is older than Canada's drug agency's cutoff of 25. His mother, Tara Bray, says some other provinces, like Saskatchewan, have granted exceptions.
It's painful watching him go from being able to do things to be down to the strength of his thumb running his life. So, but we're hopeful. We see people getting it, so we're hopeful that someday he will have it too.
Health Minister Uzoma Eseguera says they've asked the national agency for an urgent review of that cutoff age. President Donald Trump is blaming Canada for a large number of drug overdose deaths in the U.S. Trump was asked again last night about his plan for tariffs on Canada and Mexico.
Canada, very much so. They've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. They could have stopped them, and they didn't. And they've killed 300,000 people last year, my opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive. And people are getting killed and families are being destroyed.
On his first day back in the White House, Trump said he's considering 25% tariffs against Canada starting February 1st. Now, the potential of those tariffs on Canadian goods is top of mind at this year's Ag Days in Brandon. Producers at the Agricultural Productions and Technology Expo say they are anxiously watching and waiting. Linda Nielsen is a grain farmer near Starbucks. She says farmers already have enough mental stress because of the unpredictability of the industry. Nielsen says the threat of U.S. tariffs will make it worse.
It's a whole new ball game, and it's so uncertain. And if you think mental health is a
is a thing nowadays. Just wait. If Trump does that, you want to see mental health skyrocket. I think it's not going to be good for entire societies like Canada and the U.S.
Nielsen and her husband say it's important for Canadian politicians to present a united front. Now, according to the province, 46% of Manitoba's agri-food exports go to the U.S. Brandon police are hailing a new anti-theft initiative as a success. The provincially funded crackdown has resulted in 70 arrests in its first few months. Walter Kozier runs the Aurora TV and radio repair shop. He says thieves have become more brazen in recent years.
In the last 55 years, we haven't had hardly any trouble. We've only found it exponentially happening in the last 5 years. Society and law doesn't punish people or use restitution methods.
Brandon received $85,000 from the Manitoba government for this anti-theft initiative. And the city of Winnipeg is finally set to fill a new job Scott Gillingham promised when he ran for mayor back in 2022. The city has selected its first chief construction officer, a new position intended to oversee major projects. A search committee has selected Tom Sparrow from BC from a field of 44 candidates. The hire still faces City Council approval on January 30th. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast. It is not as cold as yesterday morning, Abby.
Not as cold as yesterday for sure. The menu for today is more like drifting snow that should be clearing in the southern part of the province. Though as you move north, you're going to see more colder conditions. So just be prepared for mixed conditions. Today, we'll see temperatures dropping significantly in most of the regions. In Winnipeg right now, -16, light snow drifting, causing havoc on the highways. Expect the snow to clear by midday, and we'll see temperatures drop to around -21 in Winnipeg today, though the wind chill this morning feels like -29, so brace for that. In the Pembina Valley region, similar conditions, -14 in Morden, light snow in that part of the province also, which should clear by midday. Then we head west to Brandon for folks heading to the event. We have temperatures around -14 at this time. You see some light snow that should end by the morning period, about 2 centimeters. The wind chill is not really going to affect too much. It's just going to be around -27 for folks in Brandon. Today, the high would be around -18. In the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at -16. Light snow we're seeing that should end by midday, followed by a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures would get to -18, and it feels like -27 this morning. In the Interlake region, we're seeing a -17 in Gimli. Temperatures dropping to -21, and in the Pamphlet-Flon, drifting snow already joined the party there. We're seeing temperatures around -23, and temperatures will reach -16. Thompson at -31, Churchill -21. Wind chill in both regions around -38 to -42. Down south, just expect light snow clearing this morning, and then some clear conditions and cold temperatures up north.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk.
Yeah, lots going on in the city right now in terms of the commute. Right now, St. Mary's and Niverville, all the southbound lanes on St. Mary's are currently blocked because of a multi-vehicle collision. Heading northbound, there's also just one lane right now. The median lane's blocked, so you can get around it taking the curb lane. So if you can, you want to avoid that area altogether. Right now, in the South St. Vital area, there's actually a hydro outage that actually has two intersections out. That's the intersection of St. Mary's and Britannica, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista. They're totally blank, so you want to treat that as a four-way stop, and just be careful as you are approaching those intersections because you won't see lights at all. Also, another thing to keep an eye out for, Osborne approaching Jubilee. There's another multi-vehicle collision blocking the northbound curb lane, so keep left to get around that. Also, all morning, this may have changed, but it's definitely still worth noting. There was a collision earlier on northbound Keniston approaching Grant in the curb lane. That was causing backups for a while. May be cleared, but may still be an issue as well. Heard earlier, another multi-vehicle collision and called says southbound Main Street just before Marion. In the far left lane, there was a collision as well. So very slick out there.
So Heather just popped in from our news department,
Okay.
St. Mary's you were mentioning.
Yeah.
That is clear now.
Oh, it just cleared.
Yep,
Okay, it must
just
have just updated. Okay.
St. Mary's in Niverville.
Okay, thanks for the update there. Yeah, if you do see, look, a little update within the last minute, just as I started talking. Okay, well, that is clear. But if you do see something else out there, if you have any updates on anything I heard or anything else you're seeing, it is a slick day out there. Be careful. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey Funk. Next on the program, let's look up. It is a rare occurrence in the nighttime sky. Every planet will be visible at once. The astronomical event began last night and will continue over the next 4 weeks. And we're going to be watching what it's like. We expect, we know we have the light snow this morning. You might not be able to see much, but this is going to clear and we'll have lots of clear, cold days. It is January still, after all. To talk, though, about what's called the Planetary Parade, Danielle Pahud is with us, director of the Lockhart Planetarium at the University of Manitoba. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how rare is it for, as I mentioned, all planets to be visible at once?
It's fairly rare to have all of the planets visible at once. To have 5 or 6 of them happens every few years, but in late February, we'll have all 7 of the other planets visible in the night sky at the same time. And that sort of thing happens once every 100 years or so.
Where in the sky will the planets actually be? Like, what should people understand about this?
Yeah, so they'll actually be sort of distributed throughout the sky. So right now, if we look low to the west, Venus is by far the brightest thing in the night sky. And so Saturn and Neptune are both sort of in that region, low in the southwest. Jupiter and Uranus right now, if you go out right after sunset, are directly above Orion, so quite high up in the sky to the south. And then Mars is rising in the east. It's a fairly bright red star. And so the stars are sort of scattered across this arc that we call the ecliptic, which is the way that we see from Earth, the plane that all of the planets orbit in.
What about Mercury?
Mercury, being the innermost planet, always stays very close to the sun. And it also has the shortest period. And so right now it's so close to the sun that we would only be able to see it during the day if the sun didn't outshine it. But later in February, it will get to its furthest point away from the sun from our perspective. And so we'll be able to see Mercury just after sunset at the end of February.
Danielle, can you see all of this with the naked eye?
You can see most planets with a naked eye. So Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars are very easily visible with a naked eye. Uranus and Neptune, you would need some pretty hefty binoculars or a telescope.
And how about what time to view them? You were saying sundown for some of them. Is that the best time?
The best time is right after sunset right now. So because Venus is low in the west, it will be up for an hour or two after the sunsets, but not after that. So this is a rare occasion where the best time for astronomy is between 6 and 8:30. So fairly early.
No doubt. Evening. Usually we're having to stay up or do the overnight or talk to shift workers who are up early. Yeah.
Yeah. The other nice. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say the other nice thing about this is that unlike a meteor shower or an eclipse, we actually have weeks to enjoy it. So if it's cloudy tonight, we have another chance next week. So we've got some time before we miss out.
Yeah, it's kind of going back and forth. We will have a few clouds tonight. I'm just looking at this. So, and then if we get colder again, of course, we get those clear nights. Why is it called a planetary parade instead of planetary alignment?
So the alignment tends to make people think that all of the planets are in a very straight line, so that if you look at one place in the sky, you'll see all of the planets sort of lined up. But a parade sort of has them more scattered, so you have to look over a larger region of sky to have them look. So the planets aren't so much lined up as they are sort of all within the same pie wedge of their orbits right now.
If someone doesn't have a telescope of their own, how can they view all of the planets?
So the university has some telescopes, and we have open houses on the last Wednesday of every month. So on January 29th, I'll be giving an open house at the planetarium, where even if it's cloudy, I'll be showing people where to look. And if it's clear, we'll be opening up the telescope at the university, and we'll allow people to look through it to see if they can see the planets.
What kind of reactions do you get when people join your open houses and have a look?
I tend to get two reactions. Sorry about that. People mostly feel a lot of wonder and awe, which is really fun for me. I still feel that way. It's quite something to look through a telescope and see the planets with your own eyes. And then some people are disappointed that telescope images don't look like Hubble images. But there's only so much we can do with a ground-based telescope. But it's pretty special to look directly at a planet.
I bet. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it. And good luck with your open house next week.
Thank you very much.
That's Daniel Pahucci's director of the Lockhart Planetarium at the University of Manitoba. And we are mentioning U of M a lot because we are live at U of M. All this week and next, we have office hours there, Communities in Focus, hearing from Gen Z on campus. This afternoon, Up to Speed is going to be live with their show for the whole 3 hours from 3 to 6. That's this afternoon on campus at U of M.
We've traveled the seas, we've ridden the stars, we've seen everything from Saturn to Mars. As much as it seems like you own my heart, it's astronomy, we're two worlds apart. We're two worlds apart. I'd stayed with you, but here face to face, a stranger that I once knew. I thought if I wanted, I'd fall back in love. You said distance brings fondness, but guess not with us. The only mistake that we didn't make was run. Now look what we've done. We've traveled the seas, we've ridden the stars, we've seen everything from Saturn to Mars. As much as it seems like you own my heart, it's astronomy, we're two worlds apart. Stop trying to keep us alive. You're pointing at stars in the sky that already died. Stop trying to keep us alive. You can't force the stars to align when they've already died. We've seen everything from Saturn and Mars. As much as it seems like you own my heart, it's astronomy, we're two worlds apart.
Pretty, right? That's Conan Gray in Astronomy. It is 13 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Corey Funk's been the busiest member of our team this morning, picking up the phone. Lots of problems out there. Lots of issues with collisions and people just sliding and saying it's really slick. Please call Corey with any updates at 788-3093 and take it easy out there. We've got the light dusting of snow happening, and temperature is minus 16 right now in Winnipeg, but the temperature will fall to minus 21. Also light snow in Brandon, so hopefully you're staying safe in that city. Minus 14 right now there. And in Thompson, it is clear and it's minus 31. Minus 30 degrees in Thompson this morning. I want to mention something coming up on the program after 8 o'clock on the show. We are beginning a new series today, exploring what some have identified as a shifting attitude toward immigrants in Canada. Manitoba is known for being friendly, but how friendly is our province when it comes to newcomers right now. We're going to hear from a woman who immigrated here 20 years ago. She says she's noticed this shift about how Winnipeggers treat and talk about newcomers. So we're going to explore that with her today. And as I mentioned, this is a series of conversations that we'll be having throughout this week and next. Well, speaking of conversations, with kids online more than ever, the conversations around President Donald Trump's executive orders are sure to spark some questions at the dinner table. And frankly, maybe not just with kids. A lot of people trying to navigate what has been announced, including for some people in the BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ plus community who are affected by these orders. President Trump announced the U.S. government will only recognize two sexes, male and female, for example. And to immigration, which I was just talking about, he also announced more restrictions on immigration. And he said this week that authorities in the states, immigration authorities, can now enter churches and schools to make arrests of people who are illegal migrants. Dr. Joanne Unger is with us this morning, clinical psychologist, to talk just about everything that's coming at everyone and how to navigate those conversations in your household. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is this a real challenge, do you think, for a lot of people, just sort of trying to process all of the big change that's happening right next door?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on how connected we are with the news and the media that's out there, certainly it's going to affect us, and it's going to affect some people more than others in terms of if they see themselves as identifying with some of the groups that are being excluded.
How do you talk to, just to look to the younger set, also because, you see the word school and in roundup of people and you hear things about, we're not recognizing, if you have a BIPOC kid, you've been told not, you're hearing a president say, we're not going to recognize you as a person. So how do you even find a way into those conversations and alleviate what might, the initial reaction may be fear-based, maybe fear rather.
Yeah, absolutely. So, even as you were lining up the different orders
mm-hmm.
that have been coming from the South, my nervous system kind of escalated. I could feel it in my body. So that's one of the first things that I encourage caregivers when they're talking to kids is they're making sure they're taking care of themselves. So finding space to talk about how they're doing, how they're feeling, what their thoughts are, and getting that support so that when they have those conversations with children in their lives and teens in their lives, that they're able to be regulated, that they're able to kind of prioritize where the kid or teen is at with this information, and so that they can co-regulate them and that they can be support to them and help them and listen to them and help them work through the thoughts and feelings they might be having.
You mentioned thoughts and feelings. So one of the methods you say is to be, you can be problem focused or you can be emotion focused. What do you mean by those things?
Yeah. So some of these, even thinking about the theme that you have coming up, right? So there can be these trickle over effects of things that happen around the world and with our closest neighbor. We can see some of those affecting our day-to-day lives. And so when those things affect our day-to-day lives, when kids are experiencing things at school, maybe they're hearing messages from other people that are unkind or unwelcoming or harmful, we can look at what can we do about those things that are happening in our day-to-day lives. So that's problem focused. And so then we use the adults in our lives to kind of think about, okay, what are the steps that we can take? What are the potential solutions that we can have? And what can we do about those things? When there's things in our lives that are beyond our control, like a president making orders in another country, we don't have control over what happens there. We can't necessarily change any of those pieces. And then we need to take care of our emotions, our reactions that we might be having to those different orders and how they potentially could impact us in the future so that we can continue to function in a good and helpful way, and we can have some comfort and some healing to some of those difficult feelings.
When I was a kid, there were anxieties in some of my family members about things like war, World War, like things like that were topical for some people that were in my family. And there was always discussion around what is reality, what could happen, what may not happen. And they're very challenging. So in a time when everything's shifting, do you lean into the news, or do you say, do you take a news break from some of these things, or is it better for, or are you shielding your family members, whether they're children or teens? Are you shielding them from that too much?
Yeah, I think it depends on the age and depends on our own self and our own nervous system and our history. So absolutely, I think taking news breaks and stepping out can be helpful. It's good to stay informed so that, if things do affect us in the future, we're not completely surprised by them if they have impact to us in our homes, wherever we may be. But to be inundated or solely focused on that can increase our sense of risk and can increase our sense of anxiety. So anxiety is emotion that is designed to help us anticipate and prepare for potential threats in the future. It's adaptive in that way. It wants us to take action when there might be a threat. Now, sometimes it overestimates that risk and that threat, and it leaves our nervous system charged and acting as if the threat were happening now when it's not. So we kind of have to navigate how realistic a threat is for our day-to-day. It's helpful to be prepared for the future, but if there's nothing we can do about it right now, then tapping in, being aware, and tapping out can be a very useful strategy.
When doing something like fact checking, because also some of this will be what's happening and what's actually not truthful, how should parents approach that kind of a conversation?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because there's a lot of information, opinions, and all sorts of various things that we can watch, listen, and take in. And they will have a variety of sources. And so I often suggest, particularly with older teens, that parents and caregivers take a curious approach. So when a teen or child comes to you with a certain piece of information and you're not sure where they've got it from, I often start with a stance of curiosity, asking them to tell me more about that and where they heard that and where that might be from. And then rather than getting into a debate mode, kind of go, I'm curious about that source. How about we go look that up together? Let's go see where you saw that and what some other information, if you know that you have some credible sources to provide some counter information.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's Dr. Joanne Unger, clinical psychologist. Well, for 12 hours, speaking of the States, Canadians got a glimpse into something extraordinary, social media without Americans. TikTok's ban in the U.S. on Sunday was short-lived, but it made a big impression. In Canada and across what was dubbed Commonwealth talk, that impact was felt in a unique way.
I swear, I love you all. I do. I love you, Americans. But Commonwealth TikTok was the best version of TikTok I've ever seen.
Now 100 and something million Americans are back. Which I'm happy about but like all the Commonwealth countries were like, hey, and now I don't know where they are.
If you're from the Thanos snap of 12 hours and you enjoyed seeing creators from all over the world for a change, maybe start doing that. When that customized feed comes up, start putting in countries that you want to watch creators from. Let's see if it works.
That is just a glimpse of one of the things that was developing, of course, over the weekend around TikTok. Still so much talk about it and what's going to happen next. It is 3 minutes now to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells joins us with our headlines.
Good morning. The potential for 25% tariffs on Canadian goods is top of mind at Ag Days in Brandon. Producers at the Agricultural Productions and Technology Expo say they are anxiously watching and waiting. One farmer, a grain farmer from Starbuck, Lyndon Nielsen, says farmers already have enough mental stress because of unpredictability of the industry. She says the threat of U.S. tariffs is just making it all worse. Brandon police say a new anti-theft initiative there is a success. The provincially funded crackdown has resulted in 70 arrests in its first few months. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, lots of traffic developing. Corey Funk's back in.
Archibald and Elizabeth, there's a multi-vehicle collision blocking the southbound curb lane. Keep left to get around that. No major delays yet. Also got an update from Kirsty. So northbound Kenniston all morning, there's been a car blocking the curb lane. It's still there. There is a police car on scene as well. And it's got traffic backed up. She says it was blocking the curb lane just before Grant. It's backed up all the way to IKEA now. You're going about 5 kilometers an hour heading northbound on Kenniston this morning. So very, very slow going. Also, that hydro outage still a problem in South St. Vital. St. Mary's and Britannica, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista, the lights on both those intersections are completely out. So treat that as a four-way stop. Be very careful. Slick out there. Particularly south and east perimeter, I heard. Allison said she actually got off the perimeter because she's never seen it so slick before.
Ooh.
Black ice all over the place. So be very careful. 204-788-3093 if you have any more updates for me.
All right, thanks, Corey. 2 minutes to 8, and it's minus 16. Light snow, drifting snow. Temperature will fall to minus 21 in Winnipeg. Well, after 8 o'clock, we will start a new series today exploring what some have identified as shifting attitudes toward immigrants in Canada. And we're going to hear, actually, more from TikTok, people who've been posting on immigration over the past year. We'll get some reaction from a Winnipegger, Muslim Winnipegger, who immigrated to Canada over 20 years ago, but she says she's noticed this change in how people feel about immigrants in the city, and it's taken a negative shift, including here in Winnipeg, where we live. So stay tuned. That interview is coming up as part one of a series. World Report, though, is next. The latest in national and international news coming up here at 8. It's 1 minute to.
Today on Q.
I'm Saroja Coelho in for Tom Power. When Steven Soderbergh asked Lucy Liu to star in his film Presence, saying yes was a no-brainer. She talks to Tom Power about how the experience on their new film vastly differed from her blockbuster past.
There was just sort of this wonderful feeling of experimentation.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
There are hopes and fears for Syria's new government after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, but Syrian women in particular are determined to play a central role in shaping their country and creating a future that works for them. Their stories coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Today, it is the Premier's turn to discuss strategies to avoid new tariffs from the U.S. and share their fresh ideas with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on a virtual call. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, U.S. President Donald Trump keeps repeating this 25% tariff threat. How is that affecting Canada's strategy?
Marcia, if he did proceed on February 1st, after April 1st, or at any point, it would be effectively the end of NAFTA, because its raison d'etre is a zero tariff zone to boost cross-border business. And without that, well, what are we even doing? BC Premier David Eby reinforced this idea that it would lead to a new era of protectionism when he said yesterday that if Trump acts on his extreme threats, his province would follow Ontario's lead and pull U.S. booze off the shelves of BC's liquor stores too.
In ordinary times, we have trade agreements with the Americans that we have to treat their products like our own. But if they're not going to abide by our trade agreements, then neither are we.
If the tariffs remain a threat that lives only in Trump's head, what his officials were instructed actually in writing Monday with respect to the NAFTA renegotiation is incredibly normal language about consulting with stakeholders, assessing its impact, reporting back to Congress. This is work that, honestly, we could have expected even Kamala Harris to be doing 1 year out from the deal's mandatory review in 2026.
So, Janice, how do the premiers feel about the new NAFTA?
Well, Donald Trump is not the only actor casting doubt on NAFTA's future. Remember, back in November, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that all of Canada's premiers actually support his call to not wait for 2026, but immediately set to work on negotiating a different deal with the Americans alone, cutting out Mexico, a proposal that's now morphed into Ontario government policy in the form of this Fortress Can-Am push that he's been out selling. Yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said she was worried about certain leaders trying to turn this uncertainty into their election issue. But there were fresh signs yesterday that the current chair of the Premiers, Doug Ford, is considering stepping aside from that work to hit the campaign trail in Ontario in search of a new mandate.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. There are concerns mass deportations across the U.S. could begin at any time. U.S. President Donald Trump is implementing a broad sweeping immigration plan. It means sealing off that country's border with Mexico and possibly raids. The CBC's Chris Reyes joins me now from Washington. Chris, what can you tell us?
Well, President Trump has expanded the powers of immigration and customs enforcement officers, better known here as ICE. The new policy was announced by the Department of Homeland Security Tuesday and took effect immediately. It allows for expedited removal after arrest if an illegal immigrant can't prove that they've been in the country longer than 2 years. It also means that ICE can bypass court proceedings. Tom Homan, Trump's so-called border czar, was asked about raids, where and when they would happen. Here's what he said.
Well, look, I wouldn't call them raids or target enforcement operations. They know exactly who they're looking for. They know pretty much where they'll find them. So, again, these are well-planned operations. They're well investigated.
Worth noting that there are more than 250 sanctuary cities and states in the U.S. where local policies either limit cooperation with ICE officers or prohibit asking about a person's immigration status altogether. Many of these cities, like Chicago and New York, are led by Democrats, and right now they are gearing up for a fight.
Another controversial move by President Trump involves the elimination of federal programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's the latest on that?
That's right. So according to a new memo, all federal employees in DEI roles are to be placed on paid leave by tonight. Trump is also putting federal agencies on deadline to come up with a plan for firing those employees by January 31st. All DEI-related offices will shut down, and any mention of such programs will be removed from all federal websites and social media. Trump's targeting of DEI programs undoes many of President Biden's initiatives to promote inclusion within the government, including signing an executive order to assess any systemic barriers to diversity.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
The CBC's Chris Reyes in Washington. Trump says he wants an apology for what was said in a prayer service after the inauguration.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now.
Bishop Marian Edgar Buddy pleaded with the president to protect immigrants and respect LGBTQ rights. Trump was sitting in the front row of the service with Melania Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. On social media, Trump called the bishop's remarks nasty and not compelling or smart. The bishop's sermon came a day after Trump signaled several executive orders, and he signed those orders aimed at immigration and on gender changes. Prince Harry has settled a lawsuit against a British tabloid. Harry had sued the publisher of The Sun, claiming it used illegal tactics to gather information on him and his family. Harry and a former British MP were the last of a large group who filed similar suits. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has the latest from London.
News UK is finally held to account for its illegal actions and its blatant disregard for the law.
Lawyer David Sherborne reading a statement before a throng of reporters on behalf of Prince Harry and Tom Watson. The Duke of Sussex was not present at the High Court in London today, but the settlement in the civil case is described as a monumental victory.
I'm glad they've apologised.
Watson, a former Labour MP, called the unlawful gathering techniques used by newsgroup newspapers as industrial in scale.
I once said that the big beasts of the tabloid jungle have no predators. I was wrong. They have Prince Harry. His bravery and astonishing courage have brought accountability to a part of the media world that thought it was untouchable.
Newsgroup Newspapers has paid out more than £1 billion in roughly 1,000 other cases alleging unlawful gathering techniques, including phone hacking, surveillance, and misuse of private information. A figure has not been shared in this settlement. The apology issued today is the first acknowledgement of unlawfulness by The Sun, which also acknowledged its intrusion into the life of Harry's mother, the late Princess Diana. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Our colleagues at Radio-Canada have learned Amazon is leaving Quebec. Several warehouses, including in Laval and Montreal, will close their doors within the next 2 months. Amazon employs more than 1,800 people in Quebec. Recently, 250 employees in Laval unionized, something Amazon fought to prevent. The company tells Radio-Canada the closure of its 7 warehouses had nothing to do with the union. Canada is great at making promises to its allies, but Ukrainians are asking why one big one hasn't been kept. 2 years ago, the federal government said it would start seizing the assets from sanctioned Russians and give that money to Ukraine. That hasn't happened. The CBC's Zach Dubinsky is asking why.
It's actually the first time that we are seizing and forfeiting assets of sanctioned individuals in Canada.
In December 2022, a groundbreaking promise. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly saying the government would become the first in the G7 to seize money from a sanctioned Russian and hand it over to Ukraine. The plan was to use the unprecedented powers Canada had given itself earlier that year to not just freeze assets, but actually take them. Joly's first target, Russian Roman Abramovich, an oligarch and close ally of President Vladimir Putin.
His $26 million American accounts will be used to compensate victims.
But 2 years later, there's been no progress. The millions of dollars still sits frozen in an account far from Kyiv. Same story for a giant Russian-owned cargo plane sitting at Toronto's main airport. It too was promised to Ukraine, but hasn't gone anywhere. Legal experts say confiscating foreign-owned property is not straightforward. Trade lawyer John Buscariel points out that Canada has an investment treaty with Russia that competes with its new asset seizure powers.
You cannot expropriate property of a Russian investor unless you compensate them for it.
Canada has committed billions to Ukraine, but says it's not obliged to get this seizure done on any timeline. Orest Zikadalski of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress says that's disappointing.
We're talking about years of, the government saying this is a priority, and then frankly not seeing much movement.
Zach Dubinsky, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. Hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. We're live downtown. This is CBC's morning show. Thank you so much for being with us on this Wednesday. It is a challenging Wednesday in traffic. Corey's in a moment updating all the problems out there. Also, we're going to start a series this half hour with a conversation, our first conversation, looking at changes in attitudes towards immigrants and newcomers. Manitoba is known for being friendly, but how friendly is our province when it comes to newcomers? We begin with a discussion with a woman who immigrated here 20 years ago to Canada. She says she's noticed a shift in how Winnipeggers treat and talk about newcomers. So stay tuned. We're going to have a discussion with her. In a moment, news headlines. Stay with us. Heather Wells, what is developing in the news this morning?
Well, good morning. The potential for 25% tariffs on Canadian goods is top of mind at Ag Days in Brandon. Producers at the Ag Productions and Technology Expo this week say they are anxiously watching and waiting. Linda Nielsen, a grain farmer near Starbucks, says farmers already have enough mental health problems and stress, and this threat of U.S. tariffs will only make it worse. The legacy of a 16-year-old Winnipegger is being remembered. Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or HEROES, is paying tribute to one of its youngest coaches. Trey Basarowicz died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. We're going to hear how players who are part of HERO are remembering him. That's coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Now it's time to get into our forecast. Abby Adeyemi.
Cold temperatures, light snow, clear conditions later, mix of sun and clouds. That's what we are going to be seeing today. In Winnipeg, though, minus 16, light snow still drifting outside. It should clear this morning, and then it's going to be followed by some clear conditions. Temperatures falling to minus 21 by the afternoon, and the wind chill this morning still feels like minus 29. So take care if you're out there. Tonight, we'll see some clouds rolling, just light winds, and temperatures will drop further to around minus 28. In other regions, if you're attending the Ag Day in Brandon, you're going to be seeing some chilly conditions and clear skies, but it's mild enough for you to attend the events. Across board, just expect that light snow, cold temperatures, clear skies. In comparison to Winnipeg, the weather is on the mild side, I would say. If you look at what's happening up north with those chilly minus 40s, the wind chill. I think Winnipeg is on the mild side.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
It's on the slippery side for sure. Corey's here with the long list of what's going on in the commute.
Yeah, lots of collisions all across the city this morning. I'm going to start on St. Mary's, northbound St. Mary's at Britannica. There's been a collision. Someone's hit a pole. Cars hit a pole, and it's actually got the entirety of northbound St. Mary's blocked entirely. Also in the area right now, there has been a hydro outage all morning, and the intersections of St. Mary's and Britannica, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista, are completely out. Those lights are completely out. So treat that as a four-way stop. So if you want to avoid that area, that's probably the best advice I can give you, because it's going to be very, very slow going there. Also, all morning, northbound Keniston, just before Grant in the curb lane, there was a collision there earlier. There's a car left with a police car there, and that actually has traffic backed up from just before Grant all the way to the IKEA. I heard from Kirsty earlier, just crawling about 5 kilometers an hour. So very slow going northbound Keniston this morning. Also just got an update from Alice on the commuter line, who said northbound Archibald from Cottonwood to Provencher is just really backed up right now as well, but she's not totally sure why. Just super slow going. So if you're heading northbound Archibald, might be an issue there. And finally here, Osborne approaching Jubilee. There's been a multi-vehicle collision that's blocking that northbound curb lane. So you want to keep up to get around that. Got an update from Tim on that. One of the cars actually just lost its wheel entirely, so it won't be going anywhere anytime soon. And it's really, really backed up, as you can imagine, on Osborne as approaching Jubilee. So if you see anything else going on out there, if you have updates on that or anything else you're seeing, give me a call. Very, very slippery. Also on the perimeter as well, east and south perimeter, black ice. So someone actually got off the perimeter to avoid that as well.
I'm just actually playing telephone here with literally with Abby.
People are calling while we're
Southbound McPhillips, south of Templeton, I believe the caller has said. In the curb lane, there's a problem. The right-hand curb lane.
Okay.
There's been a collision. So southbound McPhillips, south of Templeton, the right-hand curb lane, a collision. Thank you, Abby. Abby's literally on the phone with somebody, and we're relaying that message to you right as it's happening. And once again, this is just slippery conditions out there.
Yeah, keep those calls coming. 204-788-3093.
Well, up next, as I mentioned, we are beginning a series today on the show exploring what some have identified as shifting attitudes toward immigrants in Canada. To begin, let's listen to some people on TikTok who posted about immigration over the last year.
Canada's been importing garbage immigrants for the past couple of years, and I don't know if you guys agree with me. And you see many people, they don't even speak the language of the country anymore. Too many immigrants.
Our women don't feel safe going out by themselves at night anymore. This is due primarily to our broken immigration system.
They are getting a free ride. There's been a huge explosion in immigration, which is putting huge stresses on our housing sector, our medical sector, education eventually, and many other social services in Canada. The federal government has to stop this immediately. Canada is breaking at the knees.
Now, those voices from TikTok videos are some of the first that pop up when you do a simple search of Canada immigrants on the social media platform. And those sentiments toward newcomers aren't just online. Today, to begin our series, Tasneem Valley is our guest. She's a Muslim Winnipegger. She immigrated to Canada over 20 years ago. She says she's noticed a change in how people feel about newcomers here in our city. I spoke with her after the program on Monday. What was it like for you to listen to those voices and those opinions?
So it's nothing new that we haven't heard before. And again, attitudes shift. I was in North America. I was in America as a student. And then after 9/11 happened, I was in Chicago and I saw the attitudes shifting. And when I immigrated to Canada 20 years down the line, now I'm seeing attitude shifts again. Canada was very, very welcoming of immigrants, right? And I feel it still is. We are frontline when we got the Syrian refugees in 2015, frontline for the Ukrainian refugees. Manitoba actually just announced that a Palestinian family has come here for medical treatment. I'm not disheartened by what I heard, but it's nothing new that I have not heard. And I think a lot of it has to do with just listening to propaganda, sometimes in media that is not responsible, and also not knowing somebody, an immigrant, for example, to see people, when people leave the security of their home, something that they've known their entire lives, they're coming to weather that is harsh. Like my car didn't start today, right?
Yeah.
Nobody out of choice will come and live in minus 40-degree weather. So when people come here, they're coming for the same thing. They're coming for security in economic well-being. They're coming for a better life for their children. As you can see, the world is in turmoil. Everywhere that you look, there's either civil war, or there is hunger, or there is climate destruction happening. So people are just trying to be safe.
I want to walk through the trajectory of some of your experiences. You said it's nothing new, but there have been sort of shifts over the years. When you look at your own journey in Canada, were there points where you felt more welcome and less welcome and more welcome again?
So when I first immigrated to Canada, very welcome. There was no issues at all. We moved to Toronto. Nobody even turned ahead and said, you're not from here. Nobody asked the question, where are you from?
And this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nobody cared. I have an advantage where English is my first language. So that's one thing, right? A couple of years down the line, I would get, you speak English really well. Where did you learn English? Right? Because seeing me, they would assume that I don't know English or I don't speak English. When there was, election was happening, we had the Harper government, and there was a whole rhetoric about the snitch line and the niqab debate. That's when I saw something that I have never seen in Canada, where people would question your loyalty. People would question why you're here if you can't assimilate.
So you saw that start to creep in out of the Quebec laws. Here in Manitoba, you would face those sentiments as well?
Yes, sometimes.
I was asking about in the past when things have sort of changed, or you've noticed shifts in your own experience of being, for lack of this is too broad of a term, but for feeling welcomed. Yeah. If now sort of you're saying you're not surprised and you're hearing sentiments again, how do you frame that for yourself? Why is it happening now?
I believe there's two things. One is a cultural misunderstandings. For example, in Ontario, there was that whole food bank scandal where students were going to the food bank for free food, and the food bank realized that this is not something they didn't qualify for the food bank. If you think about, Marcy, in India, where most of those students were from, there is this tradition of langar, where the temple provides food every single day, one meal, and anybody, no questions asked, can go and eat. And that tradition was here too. We've seen it during COVID, how generous communities are. So if a student has gone to a food bank and they're receiving food, in their mind, it is no questions asked, you can come here for food, right? Because they're coming from that cultural background and that cultural understanding. When you come here and the food bank has different rules and you have not made it clear to somebody, then there is going to be a misunderstanding. So instead of that, I think what needs to happen is clarity on how Canadian institutions or systems work. The other thing is there was an influx of immigration where traditionally in the past, you have an immigrant, you get a family that kind of mentors you. Now what is happening is people are coming in and we don't have enough mentors, or we don't have enough people stepping up to kind of mentor a family. It takes you at least a year to settle down, to learn the culture, to go through the cycle. I believe that's the other reason.
How widespread do you think that the negative sentiments are? You started by saying you still feel that Manitoba, you still feel is welcoming, but there's a qualification. So how widespread are you hearing the negative comments now in your daily life here in Winnipeg?
It's interesting. I do hear the negative comments sometimes from people who've been here for 50 years or so, like immigrated, because they also see a cultural shift, right? And it's quite interesting that way. It's not prevalent, but it's still there, especially as a Muslim and a person of color, right? Because I'm so visible. As you see, that was a whole thing about, the PC leadership campaign. Abhi was called out. Oh, he's a blue bomber. Like he's more Winnipeg than anybody, right? So why would that be called out? That I think leadership and the media have a huge role to play where Manitoba stays friendly Manitoba.
What advice would you give to a newcomer who just arrived in our city, coming into the climate we're talking about?
Learn about the Canadian culture. If you don't understand something, ask the question. Don't assume it's the same as where you're coming from, And I think that onus on education is also on people who are coming new to the country. And then get yourself out in the community. I was a Girl Guide leader. I loved it. I learned so much being a Girl Guide in Canada as opposed to being a Girl Guide in Dubai and in India. Very different things. So that is my thing. Just, go out, get to know your neighbors, get involved in your kids' schools, get involved in the community, volunteer. I want to say that is a very Manitoban thing to do, and that is the best way to get to know people and to get to know Canada.
Just last, you sort of alluded to this, and you said it really well around sort of it behooves all of us to get back to being real friendly Manitoba. But what do you think can be done to get back to that place where all newcomers will feel welcome and safe here? You've talked about education, but I mean, I'm just curious what is top of mind for you there?
I think when a newcomer comes, maybe, I don't know if this is a government thing or a grassroots, a faith-based institution things or whatever, right? When somebody comes, they go to either the church or the temple or the mosque, or right? So I think these institutions need maybe the government to help them with, pair a family with a newcomer. And then, maybe mentor them 6 months. It's not, you're not financially liable for them, but at least mentor them, help them out, get to know them, what their challenges are, help them navigate the school system, things like that.
So that is part one of a series that we obviously have started today. It is looking at the shifting attitudes in this country that some are say are happening around newcomers. That conversation has been with Tasneem Valley, who's a Muslim Winnipegger who's noticed an increase, she says, in some anti-immigration sentiments, including here in our city. Now, tomorrow we're going to speak to a newcomer, and she will share her experience moving to Winnipeg. I also right now just want to take a couple of minutes because we asked this morning on Facebook, what are your thoughts on Canada's evolving policies on immigration? And so lots of you writing in. Randy Bolt saying, as a former senior government official and practitioner on the immigration field for 25 years, it's been stunning to watch as the Liberals have failed to understand the dramatic changes to our society and their failed and flawed policies on our country and the impact that they have. 82% of immigrants think we bring in too many immigrants into Canada. I can't verify that stat. Obviously, I'm reading a Facebook comment here. But Randy writes, the strange focus on an unbalanced program favoring one country reeks of politicizing the system. And we have other folks writing in here. Omar Rahimi weighing in, we need laborers and skilled workers, healthcare workers every year. Most Canadians are not having kids, especially in Manitoba. We rely on immigrants to do a lot of our work. A lot of people are mad when all of the people come here, but when we need workers, then we're so happy to use them and their work ethic gets celebrated. Omar writing in. And finally, a couple more here. Ted Franson saying, this is consistent with trends throughout Canada and the world and in world history. It is the responsibility of the federal government to balance the needs of employers, availability of housing and other services like health and education and family reunification. And Ted writing in, I do not envy our leaders this huge task. So our series is going to be ongoing. If you have a story to share or something to add, a perspective to that you think should be included, please call us 788-3205. You can pitch us on our listener line, or you can always write to the show, radio 893 at cbc.ca. Those comments were coming directly from Facebook. It is 8:27 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Slippery out there, minus 16 in Winnipeg. And the biggest thing that is going on this morning are a lot of problems in traffic. And so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to tell Corey to take a breath because he's got a huge list of things that have been developing.
Yeah, and they keep coming. A couple new things to let folks know about first, and I'll get to some other stuff still going on. Southbound Kenaston at Lindenwood. Just got a call from Anna. There's been a multi-vehicle collision that's knocked down a traffic standard. The lights are still operating, but there is that standard, that pole that's down, blocking that southbound curb lane. So keep left to get around that. That's southbound Kenaston at Lindenwood. Also new, Waverly and Grant. There's a stall blocking the northbound median lane on Waverly, so keep right to get around that. That's going to cause some delays for folks. Also, all morning, northbound St. Mary's at Britannica, it's actually completely blocked. There's a truck that has collided with a hydro pole, and now that has the entirety of northbound St. Mary's at Britannica blocked, so you do want to avoid that area. There is also a power outage in the area right now at the intersections of St. Mary's and Britannica, as well as Dakota and Nova Vista are also completely out. So those traffic lights, you want to treat that as a 4-way stop this morning. A couple other things to let people know about northbound Kenaston just before Grant. There's been a stalled car, or there was a collision there that has a car blocking the curb lane, and that has traffic backed up all the way to the IKEA. Very, very slow going. I've heard from a few callers. And finally here, Osborne approaching Jubilee. There's a multi-vehicle collision blocking the curb lane on a northbound Osborne. So keep left to get around that. Also big delays, heard from Tim earlier. Very, very backed up on northbound Osborne. If you have any other updates for me, let me know. Also, just a reminder, highways are super slippery, including the south and east perimeters. I've heard from Allison, who was driving it. She actually got off the perimeter. She says she's never seen it so icy, black ice all over the place. So be very, very careful this morning if you're hitting the roads. 204-788-3093 is the number to call.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself, because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
Obviously, we're building on that national series with our local focus here, as you just heard. Let's mention some of the people that worked on the program today. So obviously, we have our current affairs team here at CBC Manitoba. Our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez, show's producer, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba is Leif Larson. Thank you to both of them. Thanks just to the individual contributors who worked on items on Information Radio today. And they are our community reporter, Shanley Vidal, and associate producers, Kalkadan Mulugeta and Chide Akuma. So big thanks to you guys. In addition to our live crews, Heather Wells and Megan Ketcherson, Joni Nicolo in our news department, and here on our live team, of course, Corey Funk and Abby Adeyemi, and our YouTube producer, Kevin Nipatebo. Thank you, guys. Doing my thank yous a little in advance of wrapping the show, because next it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we've got some drifting out there. It is minus 16 right now. Temperature's going to continue to slide through the day to minus 21 by this afternoon. So enjoy this little bit of mild-like air this morning. A national group that mentors at-risk young people through hockey is paying tribute to one of its young coaches from Winnipeg. Heroes players at Seven Oaks Arena tapping their sticks on the ice in honor of 16-year-old Trey Basarowicz. The teen coached kids with the Hockey Education Reaching Out Society, or Heroes. Trey died in October after being shot on Boyd Avenue. Hundreds of Heroes players across Canada are remembering him by wearing his initial, the letter T, on their hoodies. Ashley Basarowicz is Trey's mother.
It's amazing. I honestly didn't realize how much of an effect he had with Hockey Heroes and just what he was doing. It just makes me feel very proud as a parent.
2 teenage boys and an 18-year-old man face second-degree murder charges in connection with Trey's death. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the premiers have another strategy session scheduled today as part of their ongoing effort to answer Donald Trump's tariff threats. And the meeting comes as a number of premiers speculate that if the Trump tariffs become reality, it could signal the end of North American free trade. Now, the threat of that 25% U.S. tariff on Canadian goods is on the minds of producers at this year's Ag Days in Brandon. The Expo of Agricultural Production Technology and Equipment started yesterday. 46% of Manitoba's agri-food exports go to the U.S., and Dave Nielsen farms canola, wheat, soybeans, and oats near Starbuck and predicts what might happen.
It could be unsurmountable if everything came true, but we need to flex our muscle too, I guess. But whether the government's up to that, I don't know.
Nielsen says the provinces and federal governments need to present a united front to take on the tariff threat. A family from Rivers met with Manitoba's health minister yesterday, urging them to cover a life-saving treatment. 29-year-old Jeremy Bray has spinal muscular atrophy. The rare degenerative disease has robbed him of the ability to control his body. The drug that can stop its progression could cost as much as $300,000 in the first year of treatment. But the province has said it won't pay for that drug because Bray is older than Canada's drug agency's cutoff age of 25. His mother, Tara Bray, says some other provinces like Saskatchewan have granted exceptions.
It's painful watching him go from being able to do things to be down to the strength of his thumb running his life. So, but we're hopeful. We see people getting it, so we're hopeful that someday he will have it too.
Health Minister Uzoma Eseguera says they have asked the national agency for an urgent review of the cutoff age. Parts of South St. Vital, as we've been telling you, are in the dark this morning in an outage that is affecting traffic. Several intersections are without traffic lights. Manitoba Hydro's outage map indicates 1,300 customers are without power right now. The utility estimates the problem will be fixed by 10 o'clock this morning. Brandon police say a new anti-retail theft initiative has been a success. The provincially funded crackdown has resulted in 70 arrests in its first few months. Walter Kozier runs Aurora TV and radio repair shop. He says thieves have become more brazen in recent years.
In the last 55 years, we haven't had hardly any trouble. We've only found it exponentially happening in the last 5 years. Society and law doesn't punish people or use restitution methods.
Brandon received $85,000 from the Manitoba government for this anti-retail theft initiative. Radio Canada has learned Amazon is leaving Quebec. Several warehouses, including ones in Laval and Montreal, will close their doors within the next 2 months. Amazon employs more than 1,800 people across Quebec, and recently 250 employees at the Laval location unionized, something Amazon fought. But the company tells Radio Canada the closures have nothing to do with the union issue. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks for the morning, Heather.
Thank you.
Last look at traffic. Corey, I know you just went through it, but what are the main things you want to leave us with?
Yeah, a couple new things here. So southbound Main Street, just heard from Beth that just before Chief Pegwis, there is a car kind of up on the sidewalk blocking the curb lane. So just heads up there. As well, just heard from Derek, northbound La Jamodière at Marion. There's a broken down tractor in the curb lane. So keep left to get around that as well. Northbound St. Mary's at Britannica, completely blocked right now due to a collision there as well as northbound Kenniston just before Grant all morning. Very slow going because of a collision in the curb lane. Keep an eye on Winnipeg TMC and Manitoba 511 because it is very, very slippery out there. Be careful if you're hitting the roads on the highways or the roads here in the city, particularly the perimeter.
January, just stop already, right?
Right.
Weather, Abby.
Winnipeg and the rest of the southern regions will see light snow clearing by midday and temperatures falling to around -21, feeling like -30s plus. And for folks attending the Agde in Brandon, expect light snow and a high of 18 with a wind chill around -27.
All right, pour some cocoa, put on a sweater, drive slower, put on your favorite tunes, all that stuff. And thank you for joining us and putting us on today and listening or tuning in on YouTube to Information Radio here on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcuso on behalf of our whole team. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care, be well, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.